How are you feeling? How long have you been here?
3 months, May 17th.
And what brought you?
That's difficult to answer.
Eventually resulted in your being here in the hospital.
That's difficult to answer.
this the end? There's a noise inside my head of crying people facing death. Is this the end? Is this the end? Oh, I'm burning in the dystopia. There's no place to hide. I'm burning in the dystopia. This is the final time. What have we done to the world? What have we done to the world? I'm burning in dystopia. There's no place to hide. I'm burning in dystopia. This is the final
Und weil der Mensch ein Mensch ist, drum braucht er was zum Essen, bitte sehr. Es macht ihn ein Geschwätz nicht satt, das schafft kein Essen her.
Rum links, zwei, drei, rum links, zwei, drei, wo dein Platz genossen ist. Weil ich ein in die Arbeit einheimst und weil du auch ein Arbeiter bist.
Und weil der Mensch ein Mensch ist, drum hat der Stiefel im Gesicht nicht gern. Er will unter sich keinen Sklaven sehen und über sich keinen Herrn.
Rum links, zwei, drei, rum links, zwei, drei, wo dein Platz genossen ist. Weil ich ein in die Arbeiter einheimst und weil du auch ein Arbeiter bist.
Und weil der Prolet ein Prolet ist, drum wird ihn kein anderer befreien. Es kann die Befreiung der Arbeiter nur das Werk der Arbeiter sein.
Rum links, zwei, drei, rum links, zwei, drei, wo dein Platz genossen ist. Weil ich ein in die Arbeiter einheimst und weil du auch ein Arbeiter bist.
Здравствуйте, comrades. Welcome to Socialism Saturday. Socialism Saturday is when we take a little time out on a Saturday evening to watch the real far left, the farthest of the far left, the most dystopian of the dystopian. We do not watch the Democratic Party on Socialism Saturday because no matter how often Conservatives scream on Twitter that Democrats are communist, Democrats are communist, Democrats are communist. As it turns out, Democrats are not actually communist at all in any way. So we don't watch them on Socialism Saturday. There's no point. We don't watch liberals on Socialism Saturday. We don't watch progressives on Socialism Saturday. We very rarely watch the Democratic Socialists of America on Socialism Saturday because in the real far left, the Democratic Socialists of America are considered reformists. That means they want to work within the electoral system in order to basically take tiny, teeny, tiny little steps towards a post-capitalist society. And the real far left doesn't think reformism is ultimately a viable solution to getting what they want in the world, which is the complete and total abolition of capitalism. So we don't usually watch even Democratic Socialists of America on Socialism Saturday. On Socialism Saturday, we are watching real, radical, revolutionary socialists in America today. The people who quite literally want to overthrow the government. The people who quite literally want to abolish the Constitution, abolish our entire way of life. If you want to know where critical race theory and anti-racism in schools comes from, it's the people we watch on Socialism Saturday. If you want to know where gender ideology and queer theory, transing the kids, drag queen story hour, the idea of non-binary being a thing, if you want to know where all that stuff comes from, it's the people we watch on Socialism Saturday. If you want to know who's doing the immigration protests, who's attacking the Tesla facilities, who is going to the ICE facilities to try to cause problems, who is preventing the Trump administration from deporting people who are not in this country legally, it's the people we watch on Socialism Saturday. If you want to know who does reproductive justice shouting their abortion, hey, it's the people we watch on Socialism Saturday. If you want to know who the pro-Palestinian protesters are, the people protesting on colleges, the people disrupting college graduations all over the country, it's people we watch on Socialism Saturday. Literally every crazy thing going on in the United States today can be traced back to one origin and one origin only, and that is the radical revolutionary far left in America, and they do everything out in the open. It's just that no one listens and no one pays attention except for us. And that is what we do. Well, I shouldn't say no one listens and no one pays attention because other radical revolutionaries pay attention. Other people on the left pay attention. Just no one on our side. No fucking anti-communists pay attention to the actual communists, which continues to boggle my mind. And tonight for Socialism Saturday, guys, we are going to be venturing in to to the land of revolutionary socialism in Seattle. I don't know why I had a weird accent just then. There was no call for a weird accent just then, but yet I had a weird accent just then anyway. Anyway, we are going to be watching our friends at Red May. Red May. Philip. Yes, Philip is in the house. We have not been visiting Philip enough live during Red May. And we're going to make up for that this week. Actually, let me just tell you guys about this. So Red May, for people who don't know, Red May is run by this revolutionary socialist group out in Seattle, headed by a guy named Philip, graduate of Columbia University, of course. We have been friends with Philip for years now. Philip loves it when we watch the content that he produces for Red May, because during the month of May, every year, for years and years and years, Philip and his friends in Seattle have put together just a plethora of far left content for us. And they do live streams and they do in-person events in Seattle. And our favorite Abolish the Family socialist, Sophie Lewis, is actually speaking during Red May at a bookstore in Seattle. But they're not live streaming it, sadly. But maybe someone could go or already has gone. Maybe someone could do that. I don't know. So they produce all this content for us, and occasionally we watch Philip and Red May live, and they really, really love it when we do that. Philip once threatened to give me a copyright strike for watching his content on my channel, and then I gently reminded Philip that he is a communist and doesn't believe in intellectual property. He believes that's a form of private property, and he wants to abolish all private property. And so if he ever gave me a copyright strike, he would just be proving that he's not a real communist. And after that, Philip settled the fuck down, and he decided not to give me that copyright strike, which I think was just better for everyone. I mean, I amplified Philip's content. Philip proved he was a real communist by not believing in intellectual property in the first place. And so that worked out really well. And then we actually, we watched their first Red May presentation of the year live. And Philip was so excited about us watching his stream live. It may have been his friend Robert. Robert works with Philip, and Robert looks a little bit like Trotsky. He literally looks like Trotsky. He's got the Trotsky glasses. He's got the Trotsky kind of like goat beard. And so Philip's friend Robert, I'm pretty sure it was him, called us all secret agents in the chat. And he refused to answer our questions. And I was really upset about that because I thought we were asking completely relevant questions to the presentation. And instead of answering our questions, they said that I was a troll and that everyone was a secret agent. So Red May loves it when we watch their content. And we're going to be watching an on-demand replay this time. But on Wednesday, I think we have the last Red May live presentation of the year. And so we watched the first Red May presentation live. And wouldn't you know it, on Wednesday, their live presentation starts at 5 p.m. So it's like it was meant to be. It's like Philip is inviting us into his kitchen again. And when I mean he's inviting us into his kitchen, I literally mean his kitchen, because Philip does these live streams from his kitchen. And we have seen years of the state of Philip's kitchen. And most of the time, Philip's kitchen is pretty messy, I have to say. Not that we're judging or anything. I mean, my kitchen, my kitchen isn't spotless, so I'm not saying anything bad. I'm just saying that I have seen Philip's kitchen evolve over the years, or lack of evolution, as it were. Anyway, so Philip is inviting us into his kitchen on Wednesday at 5 p.m. when I usually stream anyway. And so we will be celebrating the culmination of Red May on Wednesday by watching more Socialism live. And Philip's going to be really excited. And he's going to be really happy about it. Trendolin, thank you for being a member of the channel for 30 months. 30 months, Trendolin. How the fuck have I known you for 30 months? Actually, I knew you before you were giving me money on my channel. So I appreciate you hanging around, Trendolin, and sending me random stuff all the time. I would love it if you could do a stream of at least the first day of the LNC meeting from last week, just so everyone can enjoy hell. So for people who don't know, Trendolin is on the board of the Libertarian National Party. And therefore, ergo, Trendolin had to go to a really fucking boring meeting in Michigan, in which she was complaining the whole time about how much the Libertarian Party sucks and how boring the meeting was and how awful it was. And this is why I'm no longer involved in Libertarian Party politics. Because I'm not, Trendolin, if I wanted to sit through another boring LNC meeting in which I had to take edibles just to keep myself somewhat from losing my mind, I would have stayed involved in Libertarian Party politics, but I did not want to do that. And so therefore, I don't actually have to watch any more LNC bullshit. So politely and with all due respect, Trendolin, I'm going to decline that offer. So what are we watching tonight then? Tonight, and I saved this one. We could have watched this one live too, but I wanted to save this one because I think this is going to be a really good talk to like break down a 2-hour Red May special. 2 hours long. We're getting a 2-hour talk of socialism. Yeah, I still love you too, Trendolin. You're the best. Thank you for all the random shit you sent me. I appreciate you. Tonight, the Socialists at Red May have gifted us with a presentation on American constitutional collapse. Picking up right where he left off at last year's Red May, Aziz Reina, aided by Michael Hart and Camilla Vergara, surveys the wreckage of Trump's first 100 days as the flotsam and jetsam of the defunct Constitution. They're calling the Constitution a defunct document. Yup, we're getting it. Yes, we're getting Aziz again. Yes, we are. Yes, we are. The flotsam and jetsam of the defunct Constitution float around us like fragments of the Titanic, and the drowning passengers shout, "Guardrails! Where are the guardrails?" And of course, Philip. Wait, Philip has created a background so we don't see his kitchen anymore? Philip, I really enjoyed your kitchen, bro. Where'd the kitchen go? Where'd the kitchen go? Okay, so Philip has a new background. The era of Philip's kitchen is over, apparently. But we're going to get some good clips tonight, guys. And I'll tell you that. So Philip is also involved in the presentation. You can see him over here. And we have watched Aziz before, and yeah. Yeah. Master Shake is right. I think we're going to get some clips tonight. I think we're going to get some clips tonight of the socialists in Seattle calling for the abolition and overthrow of the Constitution. And I just don't think there's any other way this is going to go. And so I do think that if you are new to Socialism Saturday, you are in for a treat. If you have not watched Red May talk about the Constitution, this might seem like a boring thing. Okay, I understand. Is there anyone new to Socialism Saturday in the chat? Please let us know if you're new. This is for real though. If you're in the chat on YouTube, on Twitter, on Rumble, let us know if you're new because we like to help new people along. Red May in particular gets a little bit wonky at times, and so it's especially important that if you have questions about what they're saying, please speak up and let us know. This is not an introductory course. This is going to be a more advanced night on Socialism Saturday. But for people who have been watching socialism with me for a long time, you guys don't understand. To get socialists talking about the Constitution for 2 hours, we know we're going to hear them say some things that are going to be crazy. We know that because it's just like experience just gives us that piece of information. So this might seem boring, and I understand why you might think that, but for wonky nerds like us, this is like gold. This is like Philip has delivered us to the rainbow, and we have found the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. And I'm not talking about the LGBTQ pride flag. I'm talking about the actual treasure that exists in the land of the left. Thomas, thank you for super chat to the channel. Thanks for whoever gifted me a membership yesterday. Do you have a beginner playlist? I've been ignoring. So you know what, Thomas, this is something I've been thinking about. And you know, listen, this has always been the question with the socialism content is how can I best get people into this content? I do not have a beginner playlist on YouTube yet. But the very best place to go if you are new to the socialism content, and listen, if you're new to the socialism content, just sit back and relax and just let it wash over you tonight and ask questions and stuff like that. But if you want an introduction to the socialist content, head over to my Substack. That is Karlyn, KARLYN.substack.com. Pay no attention to the fact that there is a massive picture of my eyes in the middle of the channel because that's a video. That's a thumbnail from a video. See, it's a video. It's a video of me talking about the DC shooter and whether or not that was anti-Semitism. So what you do when you get to the Substack is you go to the How to Speak Socialist section. And at the very top, you are going to find the 4-hour on-demand masterclass. If you are new to socialism, this currently is the very, very best place for you to start. This is completely free. It is on demand. You're going to say, Karlyn, that's 4 hours long. And I'm like, I know it's 4 hours long, okay? But what I do in this presentation is I go through all sorts of clips from leftist trainings, and I break down the language and I explain to you what it means. And so you can see it for yourself. And really, it's less about me explaining than about we just watch a bunch of leftist clips in this training all back to back so that you can really see how the language works together, how they talk to each other in the real world in a much more abbreviated form than I do on Socialism Saturday. So if you're looking for an entry-level crash course, this is the very, very, very best answer that I have for right now. It is freely available on my website. You can watch it. You can pass it along to your friends. I am working on trying to figure out even easier ways to do this. I have a couple things that I'm working on behind the scenes that I'm hoping to create even easier ways to do this moving forward. But listen, I don't have a playbook to follow here because I'm trying to do something that literally I can't find anyone else on the internet that has ever tried to do what I'm doing. I'm not saying that to pat myself on the back. I'm just saying that I'm figuring out how to create this on the fly because I'm trying to create something that people haven't created before. So this is the best I have for right now. It's not perfect, but it's pretty damn good. And if you sit down and watch this presentation, I promise you are going to see the world in a whole new way that you haven't seen before. And the stuff that we watch on Socialism Saturday and when we watch socialism throughout the week, it's going to make a whole lot more sense to you having gone through this crash course. So that's the very best resource for right now, and hopefully more to come in the future. And while you're over on the Substack, guys, if you want to support the work I'm doing and keep me in business, because I am 100% funded by people like you. I don't have any big political donors. I don't do work for any political tribe. I am tribeless. I am not a Democrat. I'm not a Republican. I'm not a leftist. I'm not a conservative. I'm not any of these things. I'm funded by people who understand that the far left in America is a problem. They are creating all sorts of issues in our society. And I am deeply concerned that the far left is winning. And I think a lot of people are deeply concerned that the far left is winning. And so my perspective is we need to learn as much about the far left as possible. We need to intimately understand our enemy in the way that they understand themselves. Because if you do not understand your enemy, you can never, ever, ever defeat them. Understanding the left is not easy. It doesn't come with watching a 5-minute video. It doesn't come from watching libs of TikTok or Fox News or the Daily Wire or Steven Crowder or any of these other things. It doesn't come from that because none of those organizations are actually showing you the real far left. I'm pretty much the only content creator out there right now that is consistently showing you who these people are, who the activists are, who the organizations are, how they're organizing, what they're doing. We know things oftentimes I will report on things weeks, months, or even years ahead of mainstream conservative media. And I'm not talking about mainstream media like NBC and all that stuff. I'm talking about conservative influencers. I am weeks, months, or years ahead of conservative influencers because this is all I do. Your donations, your support allow me the ability to spend all my time researching the far left, keeping you guys up to date on the far left, breaking down far left content, figuring out ways to make this information accessible to more people, and providing you resources and experience and knowledge to go out into your community and to teach this stuff to other people, because that is the name of the game, guys. It is not just about us dicking around on the internet on a Saturday night. You are here because you are in a class to learn about the far left. I am the teacher of the class. You are the student of the class. It is my job to break down this information for you and answer your questions in a way that you can understand it. It is then your job to go out and share this information with your friends and family, because that is the only way we are going to make sure that as many people know about what is going on as possible, and that what people know is actually hinged into reality. What's the alternative for socialism? How about the system we currently have? America is not a socialist system. See, this is a socialist that accidentally came to Socialism Saturday because they thought we were socialists. This happens all the time. Socialists show up here. Conservatives show up here thinking we're socialists. What's an alternative system for socialism in America? How about the system we already have? And you guys can fuck off and try to destroy another society somewhere else in the world. We are not a socialist country in America. Therefore, we do not need an alternative to socialism. We just need to prevent you guys from actually gaining power and doing what you want to do, which, by the way, what socialists want to do is overthrow the Constitution, overthrow the United States government, abolish all prisons, abolish all money, abolish all banks, abolish the Supreme Court, get rid of all laws entirely. And then they commandeer the food sources. And then they commandeer all private property. So they're going to commandeer your homes. They're not going to allow you to have businesses. They're not going to allow you to have parental rights. By the way, do you guys know that socialists like this believe that parental rights are a form of private property? They literally want to take your kids away and have them raised by the commune. Do you think we don't know what you guys are doing? Do you think we don't know? Do you think that we've just been sitting around watching you guys for dozens of hours a week for no reason? Come on. So I think the alternative to socialism is the system that we have currently. Maybe a little bit more fascistic if I'm getting my dream world. But, you know, beggars can't be choosers. Beggars can't be choosers. Anyway, guys, if you feel like supporting my work, head over to my Substack. That is the very best way to support the work I'm doing. $8 a month, $80 a year. I'm completely funded by you. You guys allow me to stay independent so that my only job is to show up and to tell you the truth and to show you the receipts. You do get a variety of perks when you support my work, including access to my supporter Discord, including access to spy streams where we go inside live leftist trainings and we actually watch them live and break them down live. You get all sorts of good stuff. And you get to keep coming to Socialism Saturday on the internet, which is pretty cool. Now, we do have a super chat goal for Socialism Saturday, and Thomas has already got to start off on that goal. So we do a $100 goal for super chats on Socialism Saturday. If you appreciate the fact that I'm about to spend about 4 hours probably spending time watching socialism with you, breaking it down, answering your questions, stuff like that, please feel free to throw in a $5 super chat, $10 super chat, whatever you feel like doing, because again, I can't do this unless you guys allow me to do this. And so super chats are one of the ways that I can fund this work and keep it going. And if 20 people throw in $5, then we've already hit the goal. And I promise you, I'm going to be in a much better mood If we meet the goal early, I'm going to be much nicer if we meet the goal early. Anyway, we do have some rules for Socialism Saturday. So if you are new to Socialism Saturday, we do have, this is not like your normal live stream that you're going to find on the internet. We do have a set of rules that I do ask everyone to adhere to. And to explain those rules before we get into our video today, we're going to play a helpful little video put together by our friend Reagan. And we love Reagan because when Reagan needs to leave early or not be here, she actually apologizes for that. Like, I have to go to a birthday party. Reagan, you don't have to apologize. You're allowed to miss a stream. But we love Reagan because she does all sorts of great stuff for the community. And her absence will be felt when she goes to a family obligation, which she is allowed to do. No one has to ask permission or anything. Anyway, guys, please pay attention to this informative video to learn about the rules of how we operate Socialism Saturday and understand that this is best for everyone to create an environment where people can actually learn this stuff. All right, for anyone that's new, we have some rules for Socialism Saturday. Let me go over them real quick. Socialism Saturday is a research group and a class. We do take this seriously. You're allowed to have fun. You're allowed to have a drink or two. You're allowed to kind of kick back and joke in the chat. However, I need everyone to understand that when we are researching the radical revolutionary left, we do take this seriously. And so if you're shitposting in my chat, I'm going to tell you to stop. If you are posting off topic in the chat, I'm going to ask you to stop at some point because it's going to be distracting to what we're doing. I need you to think of yourself as in a classroom. And I'm not talking about an online classroom. I'm talking about a real life classroom, okay? When you walk into a real life classroom, I am the teacher, you are the students. You are sitting in the desk, I am sitting in the front of the classroom. I'm standing there teaching you what is going on. If you were in a real life classroom, you wouldn't walk in, start throwing shit at the wall, yelling, saying, I disagree with you because my best friend said something different. That's not allowed. I don't care about your feelings. I'm not going to coddle your opinion. And that's going to be the way it is. And if you don't like it, you don't have to be here. But if you are in my classroom, you will respect my rules and you will listen to me. And if you do not do that, then you will be removed. And how you feel about being removed makes no difference to me at all. The expectation is if you're going to be here and you're going to be watching socialism with us and you're going to be participating in the chat, you are doing it because you are serious about learning this topic and understanding this topic. The minute that I think that you're just fucking around or you're trolling or something like that, you're going to get put in a timeout or permanently banned, and that's just going to be the way it is. Rule number 2, don't be a dick. Do not insult me. Do not insult other people in the chat. I can do whatever I want because I am the queen fascist bitch of my YouTube channel. So I can say and do whatever I want. But if you don't insult me and you don't insult other people in the chat, we're not going to have a problem. So be an adult, rein that shit in. Number 3, no whining. I don't care about your feelings. I don't care if you feel personally attacked. It makes no difference to me at all. And I promise you, I care about your feelings a little bit more than the left does. So if you can't handle me, you can't handle the left. If you start whining and complaining because you don't like the rules or you think you're being treated unfairly, you can just leave, bro. There's the door. You don't have to be here. Number 4, listen. Our job here and why we do Socialism Saturday is to listen to what the left is saying, to listen to what real leftists are doing in the real world. This is not to support your confirmation bias. This is not to support any conservative bullshit narrative that you may have heard on Glenn Beck that one time. This is not to be what you want it to be. This is to engage with reality. We need to listen, we need to actively listen, and we need to understand the left better than they understand themselves. That is the purpose of this exercise, okay? As part of that, I do ask that people refrain from debunking. You do not have a single debunk in your arsenal about the left is stupid because of reasons X, Y, B, and Z, or the left is her hypocrites for reasons X, Y, B, and Z. You don't have a single debunk that we haven't heard before, okay? And every time you put energy into debunking, that is energy that you're not putting into listening. So if I see you debunking, I'm going to tell you to stop because you need to put that energy into listening instead. Lastly, break the rules of my chat or disrespect me in any way, and I'll just kick you out, and that's the way it is. All right, everyone, those are our rules for Socialism Saturday. Now, I'm very excited because I have a new beer that I haven't tried yet. And for Socialism Saturday, if you guys are drinking anything fun tonight, let us know in the chat what you're drinking. Of course, drinking does help numb the pain as we are embarking on watching 2 straight hours of socialism. And so I have a Left Hand Zesty Dreams Nitro Meyer Lemon Blonde Ale. And Left Hand usually does stouts. At least that's what I know Left Hand for is stouts. And their stouts are pretty good. But you know what? The weather is warm. And I think that I might enjoy a nice, like, zesty, lemony nitro beer. And so cheers for that. Cheers to everyone. We also do have, I want to thank Thank you to I'm Jack for the $20 super sticker. So we are now 25% of the way to our super chat goal. As a reminder, guys, I do have a $100 super chat goal that we do on Socialism Saturdays to fund the work I'm doing. If you feel like throwing in $5 or $10 or anything like that, help us hit this $100 goal. And I promise you, I will be much nicer if we hit this goal earlier in the stream. All right. We are watching the American constitutional collapse, courtesy of the Revolutionary Socialists in Red May. If you have questions at any time throughout this presentation, please feel free to chat them in. There are no stupid questions. If you don't understand something, please, 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 please ask, and we will answer you. All right, everyone ready? Has everyone mounted the like button for me? There's a hang on, pause. There is a shocking disparity between the number of people watching the stream right now and the number of people who have mounted the like button for me. So let's get those likes up, huh? Let's get those likes up. Come on. Come on. Liking the video allows YouTube to, or encourages rather, YouTube to recommend the video to more people. Let's get those likes up. Come on. The more people who like the video, the more people that we're going to attract. Okay, thank you. I just saw a nice big jump in likes. Keep liking the video. But now we're going to get started. All right, let's get this party started. Why can't we hear Philip?
Elements.
Oh, because Philip had sound issues.
Philip, you need to unmute yourself. Sorry.
Philip! Philip went to Columbia, everyone. Come on, Philip. We believe in you. Unmute yourself, bro. Yes.
I'm sorry. Am I on live, Mahim? Okay.
How beautiful and yellow that is.
Sorry for the technical foul-up. To continue, De-Reification in Art Now at 2 p.m. on Tuesday, May 27th with Jella Mansour, Matt.
I know. Philip has apparently added a new satanic background to his life. Philip doesn't want us to see his kitchen today. It's very... Philip, we want to see your kitchen again, bro. I'm really hoping you show us the kitchen on Wednesday.
Browning, Anita Chari, and Min Nguyen. And on Wednesday at 2 p.m., Fake Work, How I Began to Suspect That Capitalism Was a Joke, based on a book by LeClaire Laberge, who will be there in conversation with Jason Reed, Madeline Lane McKinley, and Sarah Jaffe. And finally, the weekend after, on Thursday, we begin our mammoth live events, starting with Whatever Happened to Revolution at the Town Hall at 7:30 p.m. with Jasper Burns, Colleen Line, Nikhil Pal Singh, and Idris Robinson. So we have a lot of stuff to do, and in order for us to keep doing this, this is our 9th year of doing it, we need to raise money. We don't get any from the government. Well, at least they can't cut it off. But we depend on your generosity, your kindness, your inspiration. Go to our website, www.redmayseattle.org.
I just want to note what Philip just said, which normally I wouldn't need to point out, except that the common question that conservatives ask is, how are they funded? They're funded via donations. They don't get money from the government. They're funded via donations. So how is Philip able to cure? It is actually very impressive what Philip does. I know I kind of rag on Philip a little bit, but Philip puts together a massive amount of content in the month of May. He does in-person events. He does online events. Like, he is coordinating all of this stuff. And what I want people to understand about this is anyone can do what Philip is doing. There's no reason that people on our side couldn't do what Philip is doing, right? He's not doing it because he's paid to do it. I'm sure they barely scrape by in terms of like with donations and stuff like that. but he's not doing this because he's funded by some outside thing to do it. He's funded because this is who Philip is. This is part of his identity. This is his thing. And he gets people to donate money so that he can put together all this socialist content. And that's how it works. Hey, Scott, thank you. $10 worth of nicer. Thank you, Scott. I appreciate that. Yeah, they're redirecting the fruits of capitalism towards the socialist cause. Exactly.
And you will find a donate button. All you have to do is press that, and you'll be offered two options. One is our Patreon. You can be a regular patron. The other is a GoFundMe. So without further ado, I'd like to get on to our current program, which is American Constitutional Collapse. And who better to orient us in this particular subject than the author of The Constitutional Bind and The Two Faces of American Freedom, Aziz Rana of Boston University. Aziz, welcome back.
I thought he was Boston College.
Having me back. I think I'm unmuted. Great. Thanks so much for having me back. Thanks to all of the organizers, to you, Philip, to Mahim, for your work in putting on Red May every year. It's great to be here. It's great to be in conversation with both Camilla and Michael. And I think what I'm going to do is, for maybe about 30 minutes, just give an account of where I see the constitutional moment in the US. And maybe we can use that as a jumping off point for a conversation that we then pursue. So in popular writing and commentary in sort of the mainstream newspapers, there's a lot of discussion about whether or not the US right now is experiencing something like a constitutional crisis or a constitutional stress test. And the basic argument about this has to do with the idea that you have a president that seems to be willing to ride roughshod, including officials within his close political circle, over whatever decisions that might come down from the court. So asserting extreme forms of executive power and then disregarding potentially court orders that would constrain what the executive does. And while I think that this is something that is quite dangerous, we can talk a little bit about how and why, I actually think in some profound sense, it really undersells the seriousness of this specific political moment. And that rather than just a constitutional stress test or crisis about the relationship between the Trump presidency and the courts, I think it's essential to appreciate the extent to which Trump and those closest to him are really attempting a much more substantial and systematic breakdown or collapse of what emerged as the mid-20th century American Constitutional Compact. And so for the rest of my time, what I want to do is just first work through what that compact was, the historical conditions, especially between the 1930s and the 1960s, both domestically and internationally, that ended up generating them, then the domestic and global forces from the 1970s really up through the beginning of this decade that step by step placed extensive pressure on that compact, including the really profound internal, oftentimes latent, sometimes explicit instabilities that existed within the compact. Then I want to turn to the Trump project.
Have you ever been on my channel before? Are you new? Channel activity. Nope, brand new. Brand new. Okay, Guy, we know what socialists are trying to do because we have them on video doing it. What we need you to do is to sit back and listen so that we can get clips of them talking about what we're doing. And so I don't want to see any of this grandstanding in my chat. If you have something to say, you're not listening. You're not listening. I don't need your grandstanding in my chat. I don't want the grandstanding in the chat. I don't want the conservative talking points in my chat. No. I don't give a fuck. I don't give a fuck. Did you see the rules at the beginning of the presentation or not? Your job right now, since you are not... Hey, Guy. Oh, no, asshole. Okay, this question is for Guy, and this is only for Guy. Guy, please tell us how conservatives... please tell us how leftists define capitalism. Please tell us how leftists define capitalism. You want us to listen to you bloviating in my chat? Please tell us, define for us how leftists define capitalism. We are waiting for you. This is only for you. No one else answer this. How do leftists define capitalism? You know everything, and you're gonna force us to experience you bloviating in my chat and not listening to what I'm saying? You seem to be confused about the hierarchy on this channel. How do leftists define capitalism? We're waiting. We're waiting. We are already sliding into conservative stupidity. Exactly. Which is why we're making an example of Guy here who thinks he can come in and bloviate in the chat and not respect the hierarchy. You are in a classroom, bro. You are in a classroom. I am the teacher of the classroom. You are the student in the classroom. Your job is to sit here and learn and to ask questions if you have questions. And right now, I'm asking a question of you because you saw fit to question me in front of my fucking classroom. How do leftists define capitalism? We're waiting for your answer, bro. The entire stream being held up just for you. Let's see if he's still in the chat or if he ran away like a little bitch. Yeah, he's still here. He's still here. He's listening. Guy, the entire stream is being held up just for you. Your options are to answer the question or to admit that you don't know. If you don't answer me in 30 seconds, I'm permanently banning you from the channel. Do 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 psh do psh do boom boom. You want to come into my chat and bloviate and then tell me to chill out when I tell you to stop? And you can't even answer how the left defines capitalism? You are such a fucking beginner to this that you don't even know how the left defines capitalism and you expect us to listen to you? And now you're so much of a coward that you can't even admit in the chat that you don't know how the left defines capitalism because you don't know anything about the left. So last chance, Guy. Last chance. Do you want to answer or do you want to be permanently banned? This is your average conservative, people. This is why the left is winning. I have to spend 5 minutes yelling at fucking conservatives to prove the point that their job is to actually sit their asses down and shut the fuck up and learn for once. And they can't even do that. And then when you ask them very basic questions, they run away like the cowardly little fucking women that they are. All right, since Guy is not answering, Guy is now permanently banned from this channel. Goodbye. Let's continue.
In particular, and how Trump is sort of participating in an effort to really take apart what remains of that compact, given these instabilities, and then maybe end with a quick set of reflections about what that means for folks that want to be engaged in kind of meaningful opposition at this moment in time. All right, so what is it that I mean by the mid-century constitutional compact? In popular discussion, there's an idea that the US has basically had the same constitution since the founding. In other words, since 1788, when the Constitution was not just drafted, but ultimately ratified. And this is because of the fact that the US has not had a second constitutional convention. There's the same basic document with some small set of amendments that have persisted for over 200 years. And so as a formal matter, it can feel like to just, your typical observer that it's basically the same text that's been in effect. But in truth, one of the things that's defining about the American constitutional system, and this is something that social scientists argue, is that the US Constitution is perhaps the hardest in the world to formally amend. You need two-thirds of both the houses of Congress, and then you also need 3/4 of the Senate. It's effectively made the constitutional amendment process in recent...
I think this is a great idea. Every time I block a conservative retard in the chat, people should pay me money. I think this is a great idea.
decades over the last half century, more or less a dead letter. And then really throughout American history, it's made it incredibly difficult to use that amendment process. But that doesn't mean that constitutional meaning has not changed over time. Indeed, during the 20th century, effectively what emerged were a set of political and legal practices that informally, without formal alterations to the text, reshaped the meaning of American constitutional identity. And in particular, what emerged was a specific interplay between the presidency, Congress, and the courts. You saw the consolidation of a much more powerful form of presidential power that was supposed to provide energy and efficiency to governance and also create this particular relationship between the president and the people, so expressive popular will, and that the president was effectively supposed to be at the front of a broad-ranging legislative package that would then proceed through the legislative branch. And especially at various moments in time, what you had passed were landmark pieces of legislation, like the Social Security Act in the 1930s, or the National Labor Relations Act, which established collective bargaining in the 30s, or Medicare in the 60s. The voting.
Yo, Trendolin handing out some gift memberships to the channel. Guys, as a reminder, if you are a channel membership, you can get, if you are a channel member, you can get access to Spy Stream. And I always post the Spy Stream information on the community tab for channel members. Let's see who got a membership. Tom J got a membership. Inside of the Ages got a membership. Kevin got a membership. Scott got a membership. The Mass Marvel got a membership. Congratulations to everyone who got a channel membership. And I hope you guys will join us for a Spy Stream. I don't have any Spy Streams scheduled right now, but that doesn't mean they won't happen. Spy Streams can happen at a moment's notice. So pay attention to channel announcements. Pay attention to the Twitter. Nick also gifting a channel membership. Who got Nick's gifted channel membership? Let's see. Russell. Congratulations to Russell for getting a gifted channel membership. Come and join us for Spy Stream, guys, and pay attention to when I announce them. And yeah, when I block a doofus, we play a new favorite song. Well, how about if I block a doofus, we get some channel memberships going or some donations or stuff like that. I think that's a much better way to do it. Welcome to all the new members. We appreciate you guys being here. Let's continue.
Voting Rights Act, the Civil Rights Act. These were landmark pieces of legislation that passed through Congress through the initiative of presidents that were in charge of what amounted to movement parties, and that they set new templates for political and legal life. And then ultimately, they were constitutionalized through an interplay with the courts, where the courts, through their decisions, would assess the constitutionality of these bills, say that they were constitutional, and then adapt new doctrines that more or less provided a legal framework of permanent justification for these approaches. This was an informal method of changing the Constitution, so that even if you had the same text, like the text hadn't been rewritten, effectively what emerged over time was what you could think of as a different constitutional regime or constitutional era. And this is precisely what happened in the mid-20th century. And it's what generated the version of the United States that most folks that have grown up or spent time in this country in the latter part of the 20th century, the beginning of this one, would be familiar with. During a specific range of decades, you can think of 5 different components of sort of national ideological identity as being entrenched as a matter of both legislation and court jurisprudence. So the first is what in my own work I call a commitment to the creed, or the American creed, invoking Gunnar Myrdal's, the Swedish sociologist's book, American Dilemma from the 1940s. But really, this is the idea that the Constitution establishes principles in the Declaration of Independence that maintain equal liberty for all, and in particular, entrench something you can think of as racial liberalism. The great expression of this racial liberalism, that's one cornerstone of the constitutional project, is the court's overturning of Dred Scott in Separate but Equal, so saying that segregation is constitutionally unacceptable, in Brown versus Board of Education, and then legislatively really entrenching it through things like the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act. And so this idea as a constitutional matter that one of the essential elements of American national identity is that it is an inclusive place for all, grounded in a commitment to racial liberalism, a cornerstone of constitutional meaning.
Okay.
That then is tied to a second component, which is a commitment.
I'm suspicious, for people who might be new, I'm suspicious because these are revolutionary socialists. They're not liberals. They do not support liberalism. They do not like liberalism. They think liberalism is too close to capitalism. And so I'm inherently suspicious of what he's about to say next when it comes to like, oh, these things are racially liberal laws that were enshrined in the land. But let's see where he's going.
Civil liberties, and in particular to the notion that individuals in a kind of, quote unquote, anti-totalitarian sense should have the capacity to enjoy certain types of rights, like rights to speech or free exercise of religion, free of interference by powerful government actors. And so the US is unlike its perceived totalitarian foes, whether Nazi Germany or the Soviet Union, because of this civil libertarian ethic. But critically, that's tied to an account, this is the third component, of market capitalism, that negative liberties emblazoned like free speech are also, let's say, the other side of the coin of negative liberties like property rights, property protections that too are supposed to be preserved from...
I'm sorry, what? The other side of the coin of negative liberties like property rights. Now, for those of you who saw me yell at that idiot conservative but moments ago, the question I asked the conservative that he could not answer is, how do leftists define capitalism? The answer is they define capitalism as private property ownership. The reason they want to overthrow the Constitution is because they believe the Constitution is a document that upholds the rights of private property owners and therefore is a capitalist document. And they want to abolish capitalism. Therefore, they want to abolish the Constitution. Our government, our entire way of life, is built on this document that enshrines the rights of the property owners, and therefore our Constitution is capitalist, our government is capitalist, every part of our culture is capitalist. These are all things that they want to overthrow. So when he's talking about the negative liberties like property rights, he's talking about capitalism. Everyone understand? Let's go back. I told you something was coming. I've seen this guy before.
Capitalism. That,
hang on,
unlike its interference by powerful government actors. And so the US is unlike its perceived totalitarian foes, whether Nazi Germany or the Soviet Union, because of this civil libertarian ethic. But critically, that's tied to an account, this is the third component, of market capitalism, that negative liberties emblazoned like free speech are also, let's say, the other side of the coin of negative liberties like property rights, property protections that too are supposed to be preserved from encroachment by government actors, that it's the same form of autonomy that's supposed to be protected against overweening governmental power. But even if civil liberty and economic liberty understood as joined in this way, the achievement of the New Deal period is to say that property rights cannot be unlimited. They have to be constrained through a regulative infrastructure that provides individuals with basic sort of security provisions, economic security provisions, a safety net. And
so he's basically telling us the New Deal was kind of the start of reformist policies to restrict the rights of private property owners, which makes sense because the New Deal was a very leftist thing.
So that you have the emergence of a regulatory administrative state that's supposed to manage market capitalism. And it's supposed to manage market capitalism in particular by establishing independent agencies that exist within the executive branch, but are not simply beholden to the political say-so of the president. So that you can have a regulatory apparatus legislated by Congress, existing in the executive branch, but not subject to the capacity of the president to use as a political tool to harm enemies, aid or enrich friends. That's the third component. The fourth is a commitment to checks and balances. The thought that what marks this constitutional system is that it distributes power across different branches of government, indeed across different levels of government between the states and the national authority, and that really the great exemplar of this, and this is the reason why there's such a focus on the courts, is the federal judiciary and the Supreme Court in particular. It's supposed to be authorized to be able to strike down laws as inconsistent with constitutional meaning and practice. And all of that explains why the US is understood as exceptional, enjoys global authority, and it means that American domestic constitutionalism is actually tied to a global constitutional project, the construction of multilateral institutions abroad, the idea that's sort of become familiar of a post-World War II rules-based order that the US is supposed to be the shepherd of, but critically through a very particular, governing institution, which is the presidency. The US asserts a particular type of international authority that's supposed to be built around constitutional constraint and limitation, but the specific entity that exercises that authority is the presidency and a specific national security infrastructure that's housed within the executive branch. And the way that this plays out as a constitutional matter is that while the courts and other actors within the country give the president a great deal of discretion when exercising authority overseas, this is the notion of a kind of imperial presidency that emerges, that authority is not supposed to operate in the same unchecked way domestically. So that you have an international project that's marked by a great deal of interventionism and discretion, but supposed to be premised on an idea of rules-based order, and is supposed to be sort of pursued through a president that might be unconstrained globally, but constrained domestically. So how is it that this framework emerged? I think it's really key to note two different historical periods, and I'll go through this more quickly. The first is the period of the 1930s, where what happens in the context of the Great Depression is that you have an intense period of political organizing that's really framed by the power of the labor movement. So the previous half century from the 1880s, let's say, to the 1930s is an era of rising labor organizing and union consolidation. And that this labor movement is basically able to reshape American working class consciousness and provide massive support to New Deal politicians, to FDR, as well as to the Democratic Party at this moment in time. And because of the sheer strength of the labor movement and of working class politics under those terms, provide massive supermajorities that can overcome many of the veto points and limitations, democratic limitations of the US constitutional system, to be able to pass legislatively things like the Social Security Act, the National Labor Relations Act, and then provide enough support for the Democratic Party so that even after you start losing some of these massive rolling supermajorities, you're still able to.
Hey, communist, we don't care what you have to say either. So please do not be disruptive in the chat. We don't actually care about your opinion either. You can be here, you can watch it with us if you feel like it, but please do not bring up stuff that is not being talked about. I'm not going to let conservatives do that. I'm not going to let you do that either.
Basically consolidate and maintain this larger framework. It means that FDR is able to win a series of presidential elections. In 36, he wins re-election in a context in which he essentially gets over 60% of the vote, which was the biggest victory really since Monroe had run unopposed practically in 1820. You have 3/4 to 80% support for FDR's programs in Congress. And that these rolling victories also mean that FDR is able to, through nomination processes, reshape who's on the court. Transformative appointments change the membership of the Supreme Court. And so those new justices constitutionalize the legislative packages that were established by the New Deal. That's one key element. The other critical component of this is that World War II, and then especially the post-war years, are marked by twin developments: the rise of the Cold War and the US's confrontation with the Soviet Union, and the massive breakdown of Europe's imperial system, because of 2 world wars basically destroying the capacity of European states, even victorious European states like Britain, to be able to hold on to their colonies. And that this decolonization period is marked by intense forms of anti-colonial activism, the rise of non-white political self-assertiveness across what we could think of broadly today as the global South. And it meant that the US had to win hearts and minds vis-a-vis the Soviet Union in a global South, in a context in which, as a matter of race, the country was associated with the old European powers because of the persistence of things like Jim Crow and segregation and racially restricted politics domestically, and its economic system that emphasized various forms of capitalist modes of production in various ways could seem fairly out of place with what might be the needs of countries across the global South that might understand developments in places like the Soviet Union, quick moves toward mass development projects, as more akin to their own conditions. What this does is it pushes, especially in the North, political elites in the US, white political elites that are center-left and center-right, toward a compromised middle. It depolarizes political life. It generates conditions that lead both to the overcoming of Jim Crow segregation through Brown versus Board of Education and the Voting and Civil Rights Acts, but then it also leads to policies that sustain critical components of a limited but nonetheless substantial social welfare framework, where domestically there's a need to show a commitment to a version of economic liberalism that can coincide with racial liberalism, and internationally there's an investment in institutions, things like, for example, USAID, which is a Cold War institution of the early 1960s, that show a commitment from the US to providing material well-being and largesse across the global South as part of a shared project, underscoring the idea that American interests are truly compatible with the world's interests. So this would be the claim. The thing to note about this is that this was a strikingly unusual period in American life, where if you think about the longue durée of American history,
his point?
You don't have many of these same dynamics of depolarization. You also don't have necessarily the same cultural commitments to racial liberalism. Some version of ethno-nationalism is probably the most dominant and consistent trajectory within what we can think of as Euro-American life before the 1930s, and still really vies for power through the mid-20th century.
You have also forgotten the hierarchy on my channel. I do not give a flying fuck if communists think that I am difficult to deal with. You are here by my consent. You are participating in the chat by my consent. You watched the rules video that we played at the beginning of the stream, and now you're deliberately breaking the rules because for some reason you think you can get away with it, and you can't. You are hereby banned for the rest of the stream. I'm going to ban you for 24 hours. If you ever come back and disrupt my chat again, you will be permanently banned, and that's going to be the way it goes. Congratulations. Go away.
And even if we tend to focus on how the Cold War really imposed a huge amount of repression on left-wing forces, violent repression, one of the things that we sometimes pay less attention to is the way in which these dynamics of pushing for greater social cohesion led the right to disassociate with elements of its own far right, to treat groups like the KKK, for instance, as out of step with national identity, as deeply un-American in a context in which it might be the case that traditional figures in the civil rights movement are more truly American than, so this argument would go, than these other.
He is saying we're pulling back from our post-World War II role and that America First breaks the constitutional agreement. So is he saying that the constitutional agreement is that, like, we help we globalize, essentially? I guess I'm not tracking what you're saying.
Other entities. Now, if these are the terms that set the stage for the compact, what happened over the longue durée, basically from the 60s to the present? And I want to focus on a few different developments. So the first is there's a profound change, structural change in the nature of not just the US, but the global economy, which ends up really undermining manufacturing, and then alongside steady right-wing business assaults on labor, really undermining the status of the union as a culturally cohesive force for white working class culture in particular. That, alongside the suburbanization of what had been the white working class, alters the nature of white political identity in the US in ways that sort of disconnect some.
I just want people to know he just said
white political identity.
White political identity. So it's important that people know, if you're new to Socialism Saturday, when he's saying white, he's not talking about skin color. He's talking about whiteness, systemic racism, people who adhere to like a white political identity. A white political identity is capitalism. A white political identity is free markets. A white political identity is the American dream. A white political identity are people who want to uphold the Constitution. So he's not saying white as in white skin color. You can be black and still be considered to have a white political identity, because if he was saying white as in white skin color, he wouldn't say there white political identity. Hope everyone understands that. If you don't, please let me know.
In the US, in ways that sort of disconnect some of the kind of classic constituencies from continued support for what we think of as this combination
middle
of racial
class
liberalism
Thank you.
and economic
Middle
liberalism.
class.
I should say these dynamics
Or
are
upper
also
class.
at play post 2008, not just in the US, but globally, where one of the things that pairs American practices and what we're seeing internationally is that you then have this financial crisis that is really a crisis at the heart of the neoliberal turn in the global economy from the 70s until 2008, in a context in which really the left in particular is less institutionally situated to take advantage of it, because the central institutions of the left in Europe and in the US, particularly labor, are far weaker than they might have traditionally been. And by contrast, the combination of footloose capital, new billionaire wealth, as well as the capacity of the right to play on particular kinds of populist scapegoating tropes, especially in the context of immigration and race, means that the far right is much better equipped to take advantage of this internal crisis. This leads to the rising status and victory of various far right politicians, of which, in a way, Trump is a domestic embodiment. So you have that as a long sort of economic story. But then you have a second global development. I'm going to end up emphasizing three different parts of the story, which is the other thing that happens that has a particular effect on the US is, just as the power of labor to be able to organize a kind of left of center, left-wing constituency among what had typically been the white working class is declining, the Cold War ends and the Soviet Union collapses. And not only does the Soviet Union's collapse sort of energize a self-congratulatory and more extreme version of the American story, a more fundamentalist account of capitalism, a more sort of fundamentalist account of the idea that the US has been free and equal from the founding, and so just simply incompletely liberal. What it also does is it increasingly removes the external existential reasons that generated social cohesion among center-left and center-right. In other words, one of the things that the Cold War did is it shaped right-wing politics and kept right-wing politics in various ways tethered, albeit partially, to this mid-century compact. But the collapse of the Soviet Union, in a sense, removes those existential constraints. And it produces, over the long run, really before the 1990s, but especially from the 1990s to the present, a general and near comprehensive defection of what we can think of as the right from the compact. And it intensifies the right-wing shift toward a much more sort of extremist brand of far-right politics, in some ways more consistent with American history before this mid-20th century, underscoring the contingent dynamics that generated that compact and the relative historical exceptionalism of it within the context of broader American life. So this is a return of ethno-nationalist politics, a return of a kind of more greater intensification of like a particular kind of religious traditionalism, and as well as business fundamentalism, all fused together.
So they're basically talking about so he's saying like the right wing is characterized by wanting to return to traditional values, Christian conservatism, and a national identity
within this emergent right, which increasingly viewed something like multiracial democracy, in effect, just the cultural changes that had been marked by the 20th century in the United States, what the country had become, as itself a near existential threat to the project of the right. And this connects then to the third thing, which is all of this is taking place against a backdrop in which there were percolating and latent instabilities in that constitutional compact that Trump's election in 2016 really brings out into the open. So each one of those elements that I described had within them really profound weaknesses. There's an invocation of racial liberalism, but in truth, the country never really addresses certain foundational issues around structural inequality that we can name through things like the intensification of mass incarceration, talk about the new Jim Crow, the new carceral state that emerges from the 70s to the present. And so that there are these latent concerns about the disconnect between a story of national progress and an experience of profound forms of inequality. Civil liberties. Yes, there had been this narrative about civil libertarian protection, but in a deep sense, the early days of the Cold War, not just the McCarthyite excess, was marked by mass forms of fear-mongering and sort of the extreme experience of threat and coercion. And then more generally, really like the story punctuated at various moments since was that while you have this general provision of civil libertarian protection, that's oftentimes really rescinded for various disfavored populations. You can think about the folks that are imprisoned as part of this mass carceral state, or the experience of Arabs and Muslims and what happens with their speech in the context of things like the war on terror and its post 9/11 aftermath, or the status more generally, frankly, of non-citizens, where there's always this threat of potential deportation that's built within an immigration system that is highly coercive. And then if we think about the structure of the New Deal and its relationship to market capitalism, as the country grew more conservative, and in particular, as the courts came to dominate courts came to sort of dominate various kinds of legal decision-making, especially a conservative court, one of the things that happens is a growing willingness to argue that elements of that New Deal infrastructure were violations of constitutional principle, violations of the First Amendment of business, or maybe even violations of an emboldened...
Okay, so what he's saying is that the New Deal... Basically, the New Deal... Okay, so the New Deal was like... I'm figuring out how to explain this on the fly, so please excuse me if I don't do it perfectly. The New Deal was a reformist strategy to place constraints on the free market. The free market is one of their many definitions of capitalism, right? Because in the free market, private property ownership is like supreme, because you don't have a free market if you don't have private property ownership. So the New Deal was an attempt to put constraints on the free market or private property ownership, which is a reformist strategy from the far left in order to constrain capitalism. What he's saying is happened is that after, please tell me if I'm not explaining this correctly. After the Cold War, conservative political white identity started trying to undermine the New Deal, which from our perspective is a good thing because the New Deal is like communism. That's what he's saying, right? The New Deal infrastructure. Oh, so he's saying that the conservative courts were saying that the New Deal undermined the Constitution, which makes sense from their perspective because the Constitution is a capitalist document. Got it. Okay, I'm tracking now.
Dominate. Courts came to sort of dominate various kinds of legal decision making, especially a conservative court, one of the things that happens is a growing willingness to argue that elements of that New Deal infrastructure were violations of constitutional principle, violations of the First Amendment of business, or maybe even violations of an emboldened presidency that, through a theory of the unitary executive, should have the ability to hire and fire elements of the administrative state so as to take apart New Deal infrastructures. All of that is playing out as well. And then finally, when it comes to issues of constitutional check and constraint, you have a very real reality that, yes, there's this story about multilateral institutions, but then there's also pervasive forms of violence that the US is engaged in overseas in ways that seem to always have their own internal features, repressing forms of dissent. And really, the context around the war in Gaza is almost just simply like the latest indication of backing policies that seem to fundamentally reject an idea of a rules-based order and the ways in which those choices necessarily end up imposing various kinds of security impositions and constraints domestically that violate background principles. So all of this is latent as instabilities within the system. And then there's this other thing, which is the constitutional order has never been genuinely democratic. This is a problem that reformers, socialists, feminists, labor activists.
The constitutional order has never been genuinely democratic. The reason he's saying that is because socialists believe that the only true form of democracy is socialism, because they believe that socialism is the only form of representative democracy. So what socialists want when they take over the federal government is they want to abolish the court, they want to abolish the Senate, they want to abolish the Electoral College. They want, I'm pretty sure they want to abolish the White House, or at least like they don't want there to be an executive per se. The only thing that socialists are okay with keeping is some sort of House of Representatives style thing, but it wouldn't be the current House of Representatives as you know it. It would actually be a much larger, more expansive deliberative body in which communities could send representatives to, like, it would be like more of like a general Congress sort of thing. So it'd be like significantly larger than our current House of Representatives, but they feel that this is the only true form of democracy. And that's why they're saying that the constitutional order has never been genuinely democratic, because they believe the current United States Constitution as it stands right now does not uphold what they consider to be democracy.
As instabilities within the system. And then there's this other thing, which is the constitutional order has never been genuinely democratic. This is a problem that reformers, socialists, feminists, labor activists, Black activists, indigenous activists, immigrant folks had argued at various periods in American life. In other words, that it's not just that you have a system that's incredibly hard to formally amend, but you have a system as a totality that's not really built on the principle of one person, one vote, but instead has a structure of representation that's built on the basic unit of the state, of geography. And this is framed
the Electoral College,
even the House of Representatives, and gerrymandering in the House through state legislatures, but certainly the Senate and the malapportionment and overrepresentation of the Senate, the Electoral College, the Supreme Court through the Senate and the presidency of who ends up sitting. All of this stuff is now familiar to us.
He just said it. He literally just said it. What I just told you guys is when socialists take over the government and overthrow our current system, they want to abolish the Electoral College. They want to abolish the Supreme Court. They want to abolish the United States Senate. They want to abolish the White House. The only thing they're comfortable keeping is some sort of House of Representatives style thing, but much larger, to have a much larger form of representation. I know this because I've heard them talk about it a number of times, and he literally just said it. He literally just confirmed what I just told you, which is that they believe that the current form of democracy prescribed by the Constitution with the Electoral College is inherently unfair because it does not truly represent the people. And then he just gave you the list of all the things they want to abolish. He said the Electoral College, the court, the Senate, the White House. Listen again.
Or has a structure of representation that's built on the basic unit of the state, of geography. And this is framed through even the House of Representatives, and gerrymandering in the House through state legislatures, but certainly the Senate and the malapportionment and overrepresentation of the Senate, the Electoral College, the Supreme Court through the Senate and the presidency of who ends up sitting. All of this stuff is now familiar to us, but it's there, latent in the system. And one of the implications of how this plays out, especially as the country becomes more and more polarized again, and you have intense forms of population sorting, is that one of the two parties, the Republican Party, is able to exercise huge amounts of political power, even without genuinely having something like a majority coalition. It has a majority coalition, one should note, in various ways from the 70s through the 1980s and 90s. People like Nixon and Reagan,
yes,
are incredible.
This is exactly right. He is against anything that limits the tyranny of the majority. That is exactly correct. They do not want any limits on the tyranny of the majority at all.
Popular, so they win statewide office in the most populous state, California. They win landslide re-elections. But, you know, by the time you get to the 2000s and the 2010s, the Republican Party's base has shrunk. Its ideas are significantly less popular. And you have a situation where between 1988 and 2024, Republicans only win the popular vote of the presidency one time, which is in 2004. And that you have now this new dynamic of, because of the problems of representation and misrepresentation, because of the centrality of the state, you have the Republican Party able to elect presidents that have lost the popular vote, then restructure who's actually on the Supreme Court, and govern in ways that are highly minoritarian because they can control the Senate, even if that Senate represents their elected senators represent something like really only a large plurality, but not a majority of the population. This transforms who's on the Supreme Court. And all of this plays out against the backdrop of Trump's rise, the efforts to contain him, and his return to power. So here I think it's useful to just speak to these dynamics. Trump is not able to hold office initially unless you have these minoritarian dynamics. This is one key difference between the US and the rise of right-wing populism in other parts of the world, say in Hungary or in India or in Turkey or elsewhere, which is those are places where the populace, the right-wing populist, has a durable majority. In the US, Trump comes to power because of the Electoral College. And then the constitutional system feeds his persistent strength. In other words,
so socialists believe that the only reason that people like Donald Trump are able to get elected into office is because of the Electoral College, which is an inherently, to them, undemocratic system because it doesn't allow for the will of the majority, because it doesn't, it assigns like a certain amount of Electoral College representatives based on geography and stuff like that. And they say this is the only way that Trump is allowed to win. And then the Constitution allows Trump to do whatever he wants. And this is why they want to get rid of the Constitution.
Once he loses and attempts to overthrow a newly elected government, the system makes it incredibly hard to hold him accountable. In other words, it's very difficult to impeach him. And then in the context of impeachments failing, it's incredibly hard to criminally prosecute him. And then because of the court that he's basically selected, that court then provides wide swaths of immunity that effectively amount to a kind of impunity to engage in criminal actions that any sort of functional democracy would hold as illegal and subject to punishment. And then the tools that you see elsewhere in places like Brazil, of if you try to overthrow the government, you're not allowed to then run in a future election. It's incredibly difficult to use those tools even within the American context. And then moreover, alongside the profound weaknesses of the Democratic Party also faces structural roadblocks in being able to implement policy, because it's very hard, given their coalition and the construction of the states, to actually win a majority, and then to win a majority without being dependent on people like Joe Manchin. And so it's hard to pass policy legislatively. It's impossible to get through a filibuster because that Just having the Senate for the Democrats requires a supermajority. Getting through the filibuster requires a supermajority on top of a supermajority. And all of this creates a sense of paralysis and fecklessness within the sort of like the relationship between the public and the Democratic Party. It creates conditions then for a right to be resurgent and even on occasion win a larger plurality like what happened in 2024. And it means that you then have somebody like Trump back in power, but emboldened, very clearly emboldened to target enemies and to enrich and empower allies. And the folks that he wants to enrich and empower are the people that have been the most extreme loyalists. And the most extreme loyalists are themselves, frankly, individuals that form a fringe part of the American right and that are committed to a wholesale defection from that mid-century compact. And indeed, I think that's then what we're seeing now, where he's not necessarily in particular coming up with all of these policies, but he's turning over decision-making to different elements of a loyalist right who are taking apart every single element. A fundamental repudiation of racial liberalism, complete with, like, for instance, the symbolic identification of the US with, white South Africa, or, the very brazen attacks on public Black status, including the public firing of senior Black officials. You can go on and on. The attacks on the African American Museum in DC.
Hang on, we got a super chat. Come on, chat. We can do better than $35 for me. She does so much for us. Let's show her how much her work is appreciated. Thank you, Tolkien fan, for that, guys. We're up to $40 for our super chat goal for today. Listen, like I said, and I said this at the top, I knew this talk was going to be more wonky, but I feel like we're allowed to get more wonky for Socialism Saturday. All right, because we've already gotten him basically calling for the overthrow of the Constitution. And I think once they get into the discussion, we're going to start to bring some more kind of like, they're going to start to, once he stops pontificating and gets off his fucking soapbox, that's when I think the fun's really going to begin. So hang in there, guys. I know it's a little bit boring. I know it's a little bit dry, but you never want to pass up an opportunity to hear socialists talking about the Constitution, because this is where they really say the quiet part out loud. So just bear with us. And if you feel like supporting the work I'm doing, throw in $5, throw in $10. You guys allow me to do this with you guys, and I really appreciate it. And if you can't do it, that's cool too, man. We rely on the generosity of people who are able to financially contribute. And if you can't do it right now, that's okay. Just sit here and learn. And that's all I ask. And maybe share my content. That would be pretty great too.
Civil liberties story. Sort of a profound expansion of civil libertarian threat in a way that the country really hasn't seen since the McCarthy period, but that plays again on these instabilities.
I want McCarthyism to come back so bad.
The system. An effort to wholesale tear down the independence of agencies through a much more extreme account of the unitary executive, as well as through a set of policies that would take apart the kind of regulatory infrastructure that had cabined capitalism under New Deal liberalism. And then, of course, an assault, interestingly, on the courts, but on the courts through a theory of an unchecked presidential power that doesn't just operate internationally, but that can proceed
Scott in with a second
well,
one.
Thanks, Scott. The status or place of the court so long as they serve as a rubber stamp, as a kind of Trumpist institution of pursuing these policies. And then internationally, a repudiation really of the kind of framework of rules-based constitutional constraint that had oftentimes been a justification for American violence, but that had also in its own way been a story of producing buy-in from other parts of the world. And so instead, a willingness to just, sort of explicitly embrace coercion and power politics as the only way appropriately to operate in the global stage. It's one of the reasons why there's an interesting return to this language of McKinley in the early 20th century, which is effectively going back to a world of imperial rivalry and of Manichaean power dynamics in which different powers just vie for authority. So you can claim Greenland, you can divvy up the spoils in various places like Ukraine.
So you can claim Greenland. You can claim it. Jenny! the other Jenny in with the $20 super chat, adding the proceeds from the last 2 blocks and some extra for the beer fund, resetting the idiot counter for additional pledges. So, hey, if anyone, if any dumb conservatives want to try to test me again, please feel free to do so, because just keep in mind that when you test me, you inevitably earn me more money from people who like watching me shout down retarded conservatives who don't know what they're talking about. If you are, but I will say this, if you are a good conservative who's here to listen and learn, I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about your retarded counterpart. And if you're a good conservative, you know who they are, and they deserve to be told off, and we need to make an example of them. But if you're a good conservative and you want to listen and you want to learn, we got no beef with you, man. Our beef is technically not with conservatives. It's with retards. And everyone can understand. Thanks, Jenny. Appreciate you.
You can reject sort of like the fig leaf of legal constraint in the context of Gaza, and on and on and on. And so what does that mean for the president? This is where I'll end now. I think one of the things that it really highlights is that while the right is positioned right now to be able to tear down the compact, it does not have the support, the rolling majority support, like the New Deal framework did in the 1930s, to reconstruct something genuinely new. If the country continues to have more or less competitive elections, the right is in this position where it can break things, but it doesn't really have the capacity to authorize a far-right project that's in many ways just a repudiation of the American 20th century. The center, at the same time, is really sort of trapped in an effort to sort of hold on nostalgically to a mid-century compact that was limited, that had its own internal weaknesses, and that in the present provides a sort of set of norms and practices that don't make sense of the conditions that we see. I mean, and for that reason, it's not clear that simply a kind of nostalgic return back to the past or a hope that the courts will solve problems for the present necessarily is a solution. And so it means that in a deep way, a left politics that is a popular front, that brings together lots of different coalitions, that's able to think seriously about the conditions for constitutional renewal and transformation, is truly in a deep way like the only path forward. And it strikes me, and I'll just leave with a
constitutional renewal and transformation.
Requires two things.
Okay.
It requires using this moment.
Look at this. He's going to say the left wants to do a constitutional renewal or transformation. What do you think he means when he says transformation?
That is a popular front that brings together lots of different coalitions, that's able to think seriously about the conditions for constitutional renewal and transformation, is truly in a deep way like
constitutional transformation. Transformation. So taking something that's one thing and transforming it into a completely different thing.
Only path forward. And it strikes me, and I'll just leave with a gestural sense, that this then requires two things. It requires using this moment as members of an organized political left to defend through whatever means are available, including, for instance, through the courts and litigation, those constituencies and communities that face the most extreme forms of threat and constraint. So non-citizens, trans persons, activists in the context of Palestine, that are facing the brunt of the right's assault.
Queering government, removing capitalism from government, removing property rights from government.
And so through this, engage in a politics that shows solidarity across different groups, that can highlight the willingness to take risks, even when it's not in one's own self-interest, so as to build trust across different constituencies that would be necessary for meaningful social change. And then finally, to see those efforts as also tied to rebuilding the intermediate meaning-making institutions that sustained previous moments of progressive, if not left, social transformation. That if the New Deal framework in that period between the 30s and 60s was built on the power of labor, the reason why labor was significant is because labor integrated, the union integrated people through the workplace into a broadly speaking left cultural world. And it's those institutions, civil society institutions, workplace institutions,
Thanks,
professional
Appreciate
arrangements, university spaces, that again are the types of nodes that can integrate people into the left cultural world that would be the foundation, what Michael calls, let's say, the material constitution of society, that would be the foundation for then pursuing a transformative left project that would obviously have very specific kinds of policy.
Hang on. I'm sorry, what? Again?
And that period between the 30s and 60s was built on the power of labor. The reason why labor was significant is because labor integrated, the union integrated people through the workplace into a broadly speaking left cultural world. And it's those...
Does anyone know what I just heard that I'm very excited about hearing? Does anyone know what was just said? Let me test the chat. Let me see if you guys are paying attention. Because I didn't hear it the first time, but I heard it the second time. Does anyone know what he just said that really kind of set me off a little bit and made me very happy and maybe tingly in a couple places? Does anyone know what he just said? Pop quiz for the chat. No answer. No answer. Jeopardy music. He admitted that the unions are communist. That's exactly right. He just admitted that the unions are communist. The unions are part of the left project. We're going to listen to it again, but this is really important because the people that are organizing the protests, like the consistent protests that you're seeing on like May Day, but they're doing another protest on June 14th. It's called the No Kings protest. That one they did back in April. They're organizing consistent protests now. The people that are organizing the protests are the unions. The pro-Palestine protests are organized through the unions, not exclusively, not 100%, but the unions play an extremely active role in organizing all the protests. The unions are also where they recruit and radicalize more people. All unions are socialist. Not everyone who is in a union is a socialist because a lot of people have to be in unions. They're forced to be in unions. But unions themselves are socialist projects to recruit and radicalize more people. This is how they're doing it in workplaces now. They're not doing it. They don't actually really care about DEI training anymore. DEI training is kind of like, DEI training was always like low-hanging fruit for them. People thought they were using DEI to recruit in the workplaces, and they really weren't. Like, the unions are how they recruit in the workplaces. The unions are how they organize. The unions are how they communicate. The unions are involved in everything. And you're going to listen to him say this. The unions are a leftist project to fundamentally transform the United States. Listen.
Transformation. That if the New Deal framework...
Hang on, I'm going to go back just a little bit more.
Engage in a politics that shows solidarity across different groups, that can highlight the willingness to take risks, even when it's not in one's own self-interest, so as to build trust across different constituencies that would be necessary for meaningful social change. And then finally, to see those efforts is also tied to rebuilding the intermediate meaning-making institutions that sustained previous moments of progressive, if not left, social transformation. That if the New Deal framework in that period between the 30s and 60s was built on the power of labor, the reason why labor was significant is because labor integrated, the union integrated people through the workplace into a broadly speaking left cultural world. And it's those institutions, civil society institutions, workplace institutions, professional arrangements, university spaces, that again are the types of nodes that can integrate people into the left cultural world that would be the foundation, what Michael calls, let's say, the material constitution of society, that would be the foundation for then pursuing a transformative left project that would obviously have very specific kinds of policy implications, including to formal changes to the constitutional order. So thanks so much.
Hello. Hello. He said it in a really boring way, so people might not be really grasping how significant what he just said is, but this is why I wanted to listen to him, because I knew he was going to say something like this. The unions are a way to get people involved in a leftist project with the fundamental goal of transforming the constitutional order. Does everyone understand? Trump should write an executive order banning all unions. I really do believe this. We need to ban one of the only ways that we have a shot of defeating the left is we ban all unions. Ban them all. No more fucking unions. None. And especially no unions within the federal government, because they're flat out telling us that they're utilizing unions to organize to transform the constitutional order, which means to overthrow the fucking Constitution, which means to overthrow the government. So why in the ever-loving F do we have unions of government employees if their goal is to overthrow the Constitution, especially the teachers' unions? Yes. No more teachers' unions. Ban the teachers' unions. And this is why they get away with it too, because they say this stuff in the middle of boring presentations that no one wants to listen to because it's boring. And then in the middle of the boring presentation, they say it in a really boring way where they're like, yeah, the project of unions is to transform the world as part of a leftist project and to transform the constitutional order. And it's like, bro, you literally just said that the goal of unions was to abolish the Constitution. Like, again, let's listen again, just in case everyone is confused about what just happened. And by the way, if you are confused about what just happened, please ask the question. I will not yell at you if you are asking a question. If you are pontificating and being a dick in my chat, I'm going to yell at you. But if you just ask a question because you're confused, that's totally fine. We love questions and stuff like that. And I really want to make sure people understand this. Listen again.
So as to build trust across different constituencies that would be necessary for meaningful social change. And then finally, to see those efforts as also tied to rebuilding the intermediate meaning-making institutions that sustained previous moments of progressive, if not left, social transformation. That if the New Deal framework in that period between the 30s and 60s was built on the power of labor, the reason why labor was significant is because labor integrated, the union integrated people through the workplace into a broadly speaking left cultural world. And it's those institutions, civil society institutions, workplace institutions, professional arrangements, university spaces, that again are the types of nodes that can integrate people into the left cultural world that would be the foundation, what Michael calls, let's say, the material constitution of society, that would be the foundation for then pursuing a transformative left project that would obviously have very specific kinds of policy implications, including to formal changes to the constitutional order. So thanks so much.
There it is. Thank you.
Thank you, Aziz. I think we're going to switch now to a conversation and bring in Michael Hart, Duke University, author of Subversive 70s and many other books, and Camilla Vergara, who's at Essex in England, and is the author of Systemic Corruption, Constitutional Ideas for an Anti-Oligarchic Republic. So anybody, Michael, why don't you throw out a question?
Yeah, let me start with two things that that I find very interesting. You know, yeah, the first it's maybe an uncomfortable question, and I want to try to figure out how to position this, especially with the way you're thinking. It's these. I mean, in many respects, is the sound okay? I keep hearing things.
No, the sound is awful.
Okay.
But whatever. We'll
in
live.
many respects, Trump and the allies that he's empowering, like you say, are attacking institutions and ideological structures that we have long been critiquing. And that seems to me, I'm not sure if it creates an opportunity, but it certainly puts us in some ways a novel situation. As you said, I mean, this is maybe the main point about it, that the Constitution has never been democratic. The U.S. Constitution has never been democratic. Movements and scholars on the left have been attacking it for hundreds of years.
No kidding.
And so the one way, it seems like, in fact, the majority way of the center left to respond to Trump and his allies and the destruction of or attacks on the Constitution is in fact to defend the Constitution, to defend the same Constitution that we've been attacking for so long. But it's not just isolated to the Constitution.
Did we just get a Duke University professor on video admitting that he has spent his career attacking the Constitution? I think we did. He did it in a little bit of a way where it might have been confusing, because what he's saying is Trump and his cronies are attacking the Constitution. We as leftists have also been attacking the Constitution. However, our inclination as leftists, if Trump and his cronies are attacking the Constitution and we hate Trump and his cronies, our inclination as leftists is to defend the Constitution because Trump is attacking it, even though we've always been attacking the Constitution. So he's flat out telling you, like, if you guys see leftists or socialists like defending the Constitution in the face of Trump, they're literally only doing it because they believe Trump is trying to destroy the Constitution. Not that they don't want to destroy the Constitution, because they do, but they're just taking the reactionary stance to Trump. But let's listen again.
That the Constitution has never been democratic. The U.S. Constitution has never been democratic. Movements and scholars on the left have been attacking it for hundreds of years. And so the one way, it seems like, in fact, the majority way of the center left to respond to Trump and his allies and the destruction or attacks on the Constitution is in fact to defend the Constitution, to defend the same Constitution that we've been attacking for so long. But it's not just isolated to the Constitution.
He said defend the same Constitution. He's saying, this is actually modifying what I just said. He's saying the center left. These are not center leftists. These are socialists. These are as far left as you can go. He's saying the inclination of the center left is to defend the Constitution because they think Trump is attacking it. But we as in socialists, have been attacking the Constitution for so long. Let me just play that last part again so you guys can hear it.
The one way, it seems like, in fact, the majority way of the center left to respond to Trump and his allies and the destruction of or attacks on the Constitution is in fact to defend the Constitution, to defend the same Constitution that we've been attacking for so long. But it's not just isolated to the Constitution. Many of the other institutions that they've been attacking, both domestically and internationally, are ones that we have long been critiquing. I don't know, the Voice of America, USAID, any number of other institutions of U.S. soft power that have really been essential to U.S. imperialist endeavors. Yeah, but also democratically. So I guess I'm wondering, this is the uncomfortable part of the question. Oh, and maybe even, they're even in his allies. I mean, there's sometimes they say things that I was like, I rejoice at. I mean, didn't Marjorie Taylor Greene, do I get her name right? At a certain point when they were investigating Trump's Mar-a-Lago thing, she said, we need to abolish the FBI. I was like, great, finally. Like, I'm totally thrilled about that one. But what do we do? It seems...
So there are some weird overlaps between like the populist right and the far left, in that there are things that the populist right agrees with the far left on. There are also things, by the way, like Nick Fuentes, I guess, talked about this week. He was like, I would work with the anti-war left. Like, and I kind of heard him. I was like, well, you don't really want to work with communists, but he actually made a good point. I was like, you know what? At this point, as in me personally, I would work with the anti-war left too, because the anti-war left at least is committed. The anti-war left at least is principled. And I kind of think that getting pulled into a war with Iran on behalf of Israel is like an existential crisis that's going to lead to a lot of death and destruction and needless spending of our money in conflicts we don't need to be involved in. And so it's like sometimes you do have these weird overlaps where you're like, yeah, we all want to abolish the FBI, but keep in mind they usually want to do it for a different reason than we do. Yeah, we all want to be anti-war. We don't want to go to war with Iran. They want to do it. They have different reasons than we do. But should that preclude us from having single issue coalitions? I don't know, man. The world is a messy place. You don't always get everything you want. And sometimes when it comes to like not entering into a major military conflict in the Middle East, I kind of think it's working with people who agree with that, even if we don't agree on anything else, might be the greater good. Anyway, I digress.
To me, I guess, what is the position? I guess I'm thinking about you, Aziz, with this. What is the position one can adopt? I mean, because it's an impossible position, or maybe I think it's the wrong position. It's the argue, and I think you argue against, Aziz, the simply defend the Constitution position. But I assume that it's politically imprudent or unfeasible to view this as an opportunity, because things, like I said, things are being attacked that we've criticized for a long time, but of course they're being done so in a horrible way with horrible results. So I guess I'm wondering if there is some way, maybe put it this way. I know I'm not asking it that clearly, but is there some way in which, rather than adopting a defensive posture, this offers an opportunity? And I mean, Aziz, you do pose this as the opportunity to form a popular front, to coalesce left forces, etc. But I was thinking more an opportunity in terms of the specific institutions and ideological structures that are being destabilized. I mean, could even though they're being destabilized in a horrible way that makes it even worse than it was before, is there some way in which that could be a the fact of their being destabilized could be capitalized on? Okay, that's one thing, and I have somewhat different questions. I might as well ask them both at the same time. The second one, maybe it's more of a comment or a way of thinking that I would like to work out rather than a question, really, which is the correspondences between the domestic and the international front of these first 4 months. Because it does seem to me there are many ways in which, and you were bringing this up in a certain respect, that the destruction of the compact that domestically that was represented by the current functioning of the U.S. Constitution in the last 50 years or so, in some ways does have, you were saying, a kind of correspondence of the undermining of a certain compact of U.S. global hegemony. And I guess I just wanted to push that a little bit further in some of the consequences, at least I see of that, which is that, it's the way I read many of the international actions of the Trump administration in the last months have been to jettison any number of tools that have to do with U.S. soft power. And it seems to me actually to jettison the possibility of the forms of U.S. hegemony that have existed over, at least since this, World War II or so. That these, and the way I see it is, if one can talk about the intelligence of the Trump administration, I'm not sure that's the right way to put it. I think that there objectively is a kind of recognition that U.S. global hegemony has been in decline for decades. Those elements of soft power really do not function, that no longer function to gain the kind of consent that would be supportive of U.S. hegemonic projects. And therefore, since they don't function, that it's not a matter of the Trump people getting rid of something that was useful to them. it's really refusing to spend money on things that are no longer capable. And so what substitutes for that, what I mean by both the decline of US hegemony and the jettisoning the elements of soft power, is that what is developing instead is a form of rule, a form of global presence, and in some ways rule, that is based predominantly through coercion, blackmail, fear, elements of war. You know, that's what, either whether it be trade war or military endeavors and such. And I guess the thing, okay, so I'm not sure that maybe I'm even saying it too briefly to be convincing about that on the, you know, what I would call a post-hegemonic US project internationally. But what strikes me about that internationally, if one were to accept the very brief way I said it, is that it's an extremely fragile form of rule, and an extremely fragile form of power. I mean, you don't need Machiavelli to tell you that you know, force without consent is not a very stable form of rule. And I see this, you know, so I see this as a sign of weakness. I mean, a sign of weakness, but this is something you said, Aziz, earlier, that with regard to the domestic sphere, that the Trump coalition, if we can call it that, can break things, but it can't construct anything. I think that's equally true, especially in military terms, you know, for the US internationally. It can break things. And so and create horrible destructions. Iraq, Afghanistan are great examples of that. And so I think that the form of power that the US is increasingly relying on internationally is that kind that it's precarious, which might not be much comfort because it is and it will create enormous destruction, but it isn't sustainable in a longer term. So I guess this, when I'm drawing the parallels between, I'm trying to think of them both ways. You know, both. If first of all, you know, does these analogies between the domestic and the international make sense in the form of power that's being developed? And then, if it does, what does that mean? I mean, I have a relatively clear, at least, hypothesis about what it means on the international stage. What does it mean in the domestic sphere? You know, that what we have is a form of rule that is primarily or increasingly based on coercion rather than consent, on fear, on blackmail, threat, etc. And that is a precarious form of rule that can, as you said, it can break things, but it can't make anything. What does that look like? And maybe it does tell us something about what we need to do to confront it. Okay, I know I did two separate things. Each one was a little bit open-ended and not quite conclusive, but it's more like, rather than questions, this is what I'm trying to figure out. And that's why they're a little messy, because I don't have them figured out. Okay, I'll stop there.
Yeah, so Philip, I don't know quite how we're thinking about structure, but one possibility is I can throw out
We're
some
really loose, and let's just do it as a conversation. I like the notion that we all talk about what we're trying to figure out, because
so I think that's great.
Yeah.
So I was going to propose that, like, maybe I throw out some thoughts, and then maybe Camilla, you can jump in, and then use that as maybe a segue into what you'd like to talk about as well. So some responses to Michael too.
Yes.
So I mean, I totally agree about your analysis of the international. You know, so my read of that same period from let's say the collapse of the Soviet Union to the present, where you have domestically pretty comprehensive right-wing defection from the mid-century compact, and so increasingly viewing that compact as itself a basic threat. That on the international stage, one of the things that happens is you have steady US defection from the very rules that it created. And so you can tell the story of, in the 90s, engaging in sort of unilateral bombing campaigns, or participating in writing the ICC, the International Criminal Court statute, but then refusing to ratify the statute, and then certainly intensifying post 9/11, as the US is supposed to be the shepherd of this international order, and yet its actions are a step-by-step defection from that order. And I think even before Trump, you can tell a story of a global order in which, in various ways, the US seems increasingly to exercise profound forms of power. So to still be the strongest state on the global stage, but without some of the underlying elements of legitimate sort of buy-in, of consent that would justify the project. And then in a way, I think Trump won, and then Biden's actions, including the context of Gaza, and then Trump's return, have just intensified that more and more to the stage now where really what you have from the US is a kind of rejection of the need to participate in the project of bringing in external consent and operating exclusively through classic forms of imperial rivalry. In a way, returning to the way that the US operated on the global stage in the early part of the 20th century as just one among a number of other European powers, the US a regional settler hegemon that contested for economic, material, and
the US is a regional settler hegemon
and geostrategic dominance. Maybe one bit that I don't know if this would be a disagreement with you is I still think, as much as the US had engaged in extensive forms of rule defection, that the US still exercised meaningful soft power even during the Biden years. Like, I still think that there's some rents to be gained culturally, strategically, from institutions that were themselves imperial institutions, like you described, like things like Voice of America or USAID. Or so I don't know. We can. I think that, in other words, that you had a reduction in the soft power, but the soft power was still there as something that was real. And it's interesting to be in a moment in which an empire and the folks that are effectively running it have committed to just systematically dismantling their own soft power, not from outside, but from an internal choice at the center, which is a striking decision to make that's like worth contemplating. Like, what does it mean to have an imperial project that does that without like external pressure requiring it? On your first point about, is this a moment of opportunity as well? Like, I certainly think so. I mean, I think that precisely because the right is not in a position to actually generate a reconstructed project, and the center basically story is a story of nostalgia and doubling down on the past, that in a way, like, I think the left is the only site that can take on board the critique and then present a genuinely transformed agenda. And you can see it in the Constitution, but you can see it across all of these dimensions. Even think about the university, where many of us are located. That it's the left that had developed the argument that the university had increasingly, along with other functions, played the role of naturalizing economic inequality, of naturalizing various forms of economic privilege, that it had a very specific kind of socioeconomic function within American life, and that there needed to be something like higher education for all. The far right has taken that on to then use a sledgehammer to essentially destroy the university as an independent institution, because it's independent from its own cultural formations. And they have a vision of the university that's built around a combination of, ethno-nationalism and various kinds of like traditionalist projects, and yet more unleashing of like sort of neoliberal engines of investment. That's no solution to the problem. But the left does have a story to tell about the university, which is that, there is something wrong about institutions of higher education that claim to provide the best form of educational experience, and yet limit that so dramatically. Like, for instance, if Harvard provides such a tremendous educational experience, why, and it has this incredible endowment, like, why doesn't it dramatically expand who's served?
No. This is not what they're saying. No. This is what we call a conservative bullshit talking point, because it is a conservative interpretation of what they're saying that is not hinged into reality. So no, this is not why they want to abolish it. They want to abolish the Constitution because they believe the Constitution is a document that was written to protect private property ownership. The goal of the left is to abolish capitalism. Capitalism to the left is defined as private property ownership. They believe the Constitution explicitly protects private property ownership. Therefore, the United States government and our entire way of life was built on a capitalist document around private property rights. What they have said repeatedly, what he specifically has said repeatedly in this presentation, is this is about property rights. So no, it's not that they want to abolish the constitutional system of checks and balances to replace it with a system where the party exercises total control. That's actually the opposite of what they're saying in a lot of ways. What they've also said in this presentation is they want to create more of a representative democracy. I'm not suggesting their ideas are good, but we're going to be clear about what their ideas are, and it's not this. They want to abolish the Electoral College. They want to abolish the Supreme Court. They want to abolish the Senate. They want to abolish the White House. They want to keep some sort of House of Representatives style democracy that is much larger than our current House of Representatives, because they believe that we do not currently live in a democratic society, because the only true form of democracy is socialism, which would result in just representative democracy that does not have the Electoral College, that does not have the Senate, that does not have the unelected court system, and that does not have any sort of executive. That's what they believe. Do you understand? I'm asking you specifically, Zachary. I appreciate you showing up. I appreciate you offering some ideas, but I want to make sure you understand what the actual thing is. So please let me know in the chat that you understand. We're waiting. We're waiting for you to reply. And if you don't understand, that's fine, but ask a question so that we can make sure you understand. And if other people don't understand, this is an opportunity to ask questions so that you do understand. Zachary, we're waiting. Zachary, we're waiting. Do you understand or don't you? There's a little bit of a delay sometimes, so sometimes it takes a minute. Zachary, we're waiting for your answer. You're holding up the entire stream, bro. See, this is why we need to teach people on the right how to learn again, because people on the right very literally don't know how to learn things. All right. Well, I'm not going to hold up the stream anymore, but that is the reason they want to do it, Zachary, not what you just said. So hopefully he might just be behind on the stream. And so hopefully he answers and we know that he's not openly disrespecting me, which would be pretty great. Hey, Donnie Girl in with the $20 super sticker. Thank you, Donnie. Appreciate it. Guys, we are now $5 away from our super chat goal. Let's keep going.
By that educational project. Like, you can conceive of a transformed university connected to a very different vision of social provision of education that would be tied to a left project that takes seriously the critique and engages in genuine transformation. And you can tell that across all of these different dimensions. I think the difficulty that the left faces, and it's tied in its own way to a strength, and so maybe this is where I'll end on this, is that in a profound sense, what the left as a politically relevant force in the Bernie years has become is the junior partner within the Democratic coalition. And because it's this junior partner, that it's sort of dependent for the success of its policies on Democrats getting elected, that it's made it very difficult for, let's say, the electorally relevant
Did you
left.
hear that? The left is the junior partner in the Democrat coalition. When he says the left, he means the radical revolutionary left. He doesn't mean the Democrats. That's why he's saying they're a junior partner in the coalition. Hey, thanks, Suzanne. And thanks Thanks, Donnie, for another super chat. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it. Zachary, you're tracking. Cool. I knew you were, bro. I knew you were. I knew it was just a delay. Do let us know if you have questions, though. Guys, we have met our super chat goal, which I really appreciate. Now, I want to make sure everyone knows that you can still send me money if you want to, and that's totally fine if you feel the urge to. But I want to appreciate everyone that's helped us to achieve the super chat goal for tonight on a relatively dry night of Socialism Saturday, but that's okay because sometimes the dry nights give us the really good stuff. So we've got about an hour left to go in the presentation. Everyone grab a beer, continue to hang out, ask questions if you have them. Make sure you mount the like button for me. We do Socialism Saturday every Saturday night at 6 p.m. And this is what we do. All right, let's keep going.
What the left as a politically relevant force in the Bernie years has become is the junior partner within the Democratic coalition. And because it's this junior partner, that it's sort of dependent for the success of its policies on Democrats getting elected, that it's made it very difficult for, let's say, the electorally relevant left to be able to be anti-establishment.
Ooh.
Because it's tied to, like, you know, a profound element of establishment politics. And so even if Sanders had a higher education for all platform, it's more difficult for, I mean, there are limitations to it. I'll defend something that was different, but like the politics of who can claim anti-establishment credentials is something that the terms of our party system has made hard because of the fact that, you know, in order to be electorally
I like
relevant,
the Maui Brewing
like
Company
you have to
quite a
operate
bit.
within the
Hope
Democratic
you're enjoying
Party. That's
that.
one thought. The strength that's tied to it is that,
or am I thinking
in
of
a
something different? I think I
way,
might be
I
thinking of
think that the
Longboard.
Far Right's project is this repudiation of the 20th century. It's the repudiation of basically what the country is. And there's a sort of impossibility. The country's not going back to like a regional settler power from like the 1890s. And in a way, the, you know, part of a potential lever or strength is that, you know, left arguments are about how to think of the 20th century as achievements, but achievements that have critical flaws that have to be built on rather than thoroughly rejected. So it's like the other side of the way in which the left is sort of bound up with an establishment that's under critique.
Yeah, if I can come in, I think, you know, I agree with much of the reconstruction that you do in the book and the previous work. And I feel that, you know, this is a very internal critique coming from you both as Americans, you know, and viewing this from within. I come from, you know, from the global South, from a place of experimentation of this empire. And basically for me, it is crucial to see this kind of evolution, at least from the perspective of oligarchy, from the kind of this division between the 10% or, you know, 1% or those who have, you know, the power and everybody else. Because if you see that same reconstruction that you did from the point of view of oligarchy, you immediately see that there is a connection between inequality, and of course, we all agree, I'm not saying nothing new, inequality and the growth of oligarchic power and the dismantling of that transformation that you narrated basically of the Constitution, all the constitutionalization of the New Deal and the Civil Rights Acts and everything that basically changed a very minimal pro-oligarchic constitution, I would say.
Global South is kind of like a nice way of saying like not fully developed countries, like oppressed countries, countries with like lower GDP, things like that. Whereas we are in the global North because we are like a fully like developed industrialized country. Whereas global South might be places like Venezuela or Cuba or I don't know, like any place that's not like a fully industrial, like any place. Okay, here's what it really is: probably non-Western countries, except in Asia, because the Chinese and the Japanese and all that doesn't count. Anyway,
to a more social one. was basically dismantled piecemeal from the late 70s till, today. Imagine that we're going to get now the Supreme Court would keep dismantling this. So in a way, you see that with the rise of oligarchy, because of the inequality and because of the transformation of the tax system, you have that oligarchy clearly has no political affiliation in a way. It just switches from one party to the other because it just bets on the winner. And if we think about, the regular democratic kind of political science, that there needs to be alternation in power, needs to be rotation, it needs to be one party and then the other, cannot be one party ruling forever, because of course this is not democratic, according to the theory. Oligarchs just move their money around, basically. And the Democratic Party in the 1990s was the one that opened the door for the normalization of this oligarchic ethos in a way. And the carceral state come from Bill Clinton. So in a way we have and I coming from Chile, I see it from the left, really, that the Democrats are not the left, they have never been in a way. They are a very centrist, pro-business kind of a party, at least, after FDR. And of course, there's not that there's no progressives in the Democratic Party, but it's not a thing of right and left. If we see that kind of narration of this history through the eyes of oligarchy, then we see that Donald Trump, who basically was a Democrat and then turned a Republican because it was more convenient and he could run, he is now the leader of this oligarchic fascist regime in which basically the rules are being flaunted and there is an increasing of contradictions that creates a possibility of renewal, right? It's very difficult for anyone actually to think about the need for a complete renewal of the system if we are kind of getting by. We really need to be in the thick of it. We need to be on the bottom of the pit in a way. And I think what happened in Chile with the uprising in 2019 and the constituent process there, you can see that the most neoliberal country in the world, in which there is a very strong oligarchy that is very connected to the American oligarchy and basically controls from the media. We have very similar kind of paths, but Chile is more accelerated in a way. We saw that the kind of breaking of the system, because what was promised was not delivered, that allowed for really a breaking of the system itself and the opening up of a constituent process. The problem is that if you don't have a real plan and you have a plan only to abolish what is wrong, then you don't really know, you can have a constituent process, but really create a constitution 2.0. in a way that is a little bit better, but it's not going to change the material conditions in which we live, in a way. We learned that not because you have a constitutional amendment, not because you have the right to housing means that people actually have housing, right? Not only because you have these rights written down means that they are actually enforced. If we have, for example, we think about the antitrust laws that kept oligarchy at bay, that allowed for FDR to enforce those laws, that he didn't need to kind of create them, they were there. Those laws were not enforced and then dismantled, right? So the idea of you allow a oligarchy to run wild in a way. And today we are in a moment in which we have a billionaire as president, in which he has all the richest men in the country as his allies. And the only aim of Trump, I would say, is self-enrichment and enrichment of, his cronies. And this is, using the state as a despot in a way, and the kind of this rise of these feudal lords in a way that are this neo feudalism of the tech bros, right? That they are even establishing their own cities in the U.S. where they are owners of all the land, and all the members of the community are employees.
Look at how offended the socialist is that Elon Musk established his own city in Texas, because he has that many employees in Texas that they literally established their own city. And they control the governance and they control the land. And it's like what is it? It's like coal mining towns coming back again, where everyone that lives in the town works for the mine, except in this case, everyone that lives in the town works for Elon Musk. So offended. They have all the property. How dare they?
This neo feudalism of the tech bros, right? That they are even establishing their own cities in the U.S. where they are owners of all the land and all the members of the community are employees. We're back to the where were the economic enclaves in Latin America, for example, from the British, that they came and they created an ecosystem for themselves and they were absolute rulers there. This is what we're seeing today as a kind of a backlash from the expansion of the welfare state. That was a weird thing that happened basically after the post-war. We know already that that is an anomaly. So as you well say, there is a continuity in terms of, white supremacy, but I think the great continuity is oligarchy and the kind of sacred nature of the right to property. So I think
the continuity is the sacred nature of the right to property. Again, there it is.
Already that is an anomaly. So as you well say, there is a continuity in terms of, white supremacy, but I think the great continuity is oligarchy and the kind of sacred nature of the right to property. So I think one of the things that is necessary to take into account is that what would you say, the transformation of the meaning through this entrenchment or these judicial decisions are softer in a way and can be easily dismantled. And today we are at that point.
Michael, do you want to jump in or
what the fuck, Philip?
Yeah. No, I mean, so I'm happy to. I mean, I totally agree with what Camilla said, and I think underscoring the persistence of oligarchic power and also the centrality of today's sort of billionaire class and its pretty fundamental defection from democracy in a way that I think lays bare that the mid-century idea that a specific kind of liberal constitutionalism and capitalism were understood as sort of having a mutual affinity just, simply isn't true. Like, I think that this is really important to note and highlight. And if anything, like,
I say democracy as what? What do we mean by democracy? Because if we're going to reestablish or establish democracy, we cannot just reduce democracy to an electoral system, which is easily captured by oligarchic interests, right? So if we're talking about a renewal, and this is something that
we cannot, I'm going to translate what she just said. We cannot reduce democracy to an electoral system in which someone who's not a leftist might win. That's kind of what she just said. Listen.
To note and highlight. And if anything, like,
I say democracy as what? What do we mean by democracy? Because if we're going to reestablish or establish democracy, we cannot just reduce democracy to an electoral system, which is easily captured by oligarchic interests, right? So if we're talking about a renewal, and this is something that I am disappointed with the left in the US, is that there's no proposal really for kind of grassroots local democracy for real as a counterpower. And there's more like tweaking around the edges or abolishing things that we don't like in a way. But there's little imagination and little of, looking outside of the own kind of US exceptionalism in a way. And
no, Zachary, I'm starting to feel like you didn't listen to what I said to you like 15 minutes ago. And you said you did listen, but now I'm starting to think that you didn't listen to what I said because you're still repeating conservative bullshit talking points. So no, Zachary, they do not want to establish a controlled democracy. No, that is explicitly the opposite of what I said to you. What I said to you was they believe that socialism is the only true form of democracy. What I said to you was that they want to abolish the Electoral College, the Supreme Court, the Senate, and the White House, and they only want to keep some sort of House of Representatives style thing, except much larger and different than what we currently know it, because they believe that representative democracy is the only true form of democracy, and everything else must be eliminated, and that is not a controlled democracy. It's just not. I don't agree with their plan, but we're going to articulate it accurately. So now I will say again to you, if you have questions, you need to ask those questions, because I don't think you understood what I said the first time I said it. Okay?
If I may, like a little, because we have a little time. You talked about several times about the right-wing populists. And for me, coming again from Latin America, where populism, and from the history of the United States, in which the populist party was against plutocracy, is almost a contradiction in terms to talk about a movement that is completely plutocratic in a way, or pro-oligarchic to be populist. For me, it's a new form of neo-fascist politics that has adapted to democratic politics and civil liberties, right? It has kind of worked it out, but we need to call things as they are, especially from the left. Right? This is my critique on this.
Yeah. So, yeah. So, I mean, a couple things, and I really, again, I mean,
Philip is having
I take all of this as, I think, a profound intervention. So, like, the first thing that I was going to say was that I think one of the things that's sort of been striking about this historical conjunction is that if you think of the position of the billionaire class, that while there's huge amounts of material resources and power, the actual policies that are associated with, let's say, your Elon Musk or Bezos or others, essentially the complete breakdown of what remains of the New Deal infrastructure and the transformation of the state into something that is genuinely kleptocratic, as well as the repudiation of little d democracy and sort of an investment in a politics that really is built around just absolute elite rule that has all of these earlier antecedents, including with the first Gilded Age and the tycoons of the railroad industry and others, that there isn't mass support for it. And what's happened in the Republican Party is this conjoining of a politics of white nationalism that has long had a mass base in the US. And indeed, in some ways, has had, the most persistent mass base going all the way back to the founding. But in this kind of post-Cold War era, has sort of reestablished itself. So the conjoining of the billionaire class with ethno-nationalism and with like a traditionalist politics around the family and social conservatism, which also has a mass base. It's the
ethno-nationalism and traditional politics around the family. Do we think this guy wants to abolish the family? I bet this guy wants to abolish the family again.
Going all the way back to the founding. But in this kind of post-Cold War era, has sort of reestablished itself. So the conjoining of the billionaire class with ethno-nationalism and with like a traditionalist politics around the family and social conservatism, which also has a mass base. It's sort of like the three pieces that's given the business class a capacity to be able to pursue these policies. And it's why I think you're right to note that, there's that my use of the term right-wing populism is probably not apt, because there's instability within it, which is like the populist dimension of it comes from the politics around race and nation and even like traditionalism, where the economic policy is really not associated even with right-wing populist efforts in various other places, but it's been joined to a specific kind of intensified form of neoliberalism that in some ways is part of why it's unlikely for the foreseeable future in the US to genuinely gain something like supermajority support, because this is always a kind of weakness as far as general political attachment. And then your point about the continued parochialism of even left imaginations around democracy, absolutely. And I'd say this is an issue of not looking to comparative examples. It's an issue of a fixation on process, and process that's really about national or let's say state elections. And I think all of those things are important to change. But there's a broader question about how do you actually create durable democratic institutions that are houses for where people actually effectively live their lives, for their neighborhoods, for their schools, for their workplaces, that provide a broader infrastructure in which democracy as an everyday ethic is like a form of solidarity that you just understand as how you live is something that's inculcated. And I think that's a significant part of what left politics in Latin America and in other places as well is pursued in recent decades that you just don't see in the US, that Americans live in fundamentally hierarchical institutions.
Yup.
Whether we're talking about
True.
the state or all of the other intermediate institutions that shape their lives, they're deeply individuated and hierarchical. And it's really hard to think outside of that rubric about like, well, what would be the alternative arrangements that would just produce a broader ethic of shared decision-making?
Let me react to some of the things people have said.
And then I think Camilla wanted to respond as well, which would be great.
Okay.
Yeah, no, just
I'll talk about Chile. So maybe Camilla.
Yeah, go ahead, Philip, and then I jump in.
Okay. I think about Chile a lot, and watching the whole process develop there in the last 3 years or so as an outsider. Obviously, it developed in a subterranean fashion for a longer time. I think, all right, Chile is a country that has a central city like Santiago, where there's essentially no equivalent in the US. It's like Paris as in France. You know, the US is so spread out, and a lot of the metropolises that you can't kind of hit the political center in one place like you can in Santiago. You had 1 million people out on the Alameda. I mean, the size of those demonstrations that people watched on TV was just overwhelming, you know, and they were all committed to constitutional change. In other words, we had both a scale of people committed and a radical goal, unlike we're way behind in the US as a left to even get to that point. And yet, as you watch the process develop, as it went through the 1.5 years that it had to go through to develop the first constitution and then have it voted, what you realize by watching it is the power of money to misconstrue what is in it is so incredibly great that it's hard to even imagine a constitution voted on after, you know, 1.5 years of ads by billionaires telling you all the crazy things that are going to happen to you if you vote for it. It almost makes me a Leninist, more of a Leninist than I am, to think, you know, impose the democratic constitution, or a Rousseauist, force people to be free.
So Philip just basically said that the election was bought by capitalism.
But I just bring that up as a start, you know, and I want to go back to one sort of element, which is the first 100 days of Trump 2.0, and what that opened up in terms of possibilities and what it foreclosed, and what the reaction was. The first question I'd ask is, were those days so completely different from the first Trump reign that we had sort of entered new terrain, that emotional terrain that everybody felt? I mean, it felt like that to me, if only because of the scale with which they flooded the zone. And I believe, so we were watching something that in its scale looks like a full-scale counter-revolution, even though it's incoherent in so many ways. As Aziz points out, they're destroying the architecture of American primacy around the world and substituting nothing for it. It's some sort of, I suppose, some sort of isolationism is behind it. But you have all of these right-wing orientations, from Christian nationalism to the oligarchical finance to so much, that have lined up behind this emblem and figurehead called Trump, who himself is a a real question mark as to what he is and what he wants and so forth. We know that he
Not really, Philip.
He wants to enrich
Not
himself
really.
completely, and this has happened in a more blatant way in this period. Whether it's accepting jets or, you know, starting 100 deals, it seems to bother nobody except, you know, liberals and some people on the left. You know, I mean, it does seem, you know, there is this attitude towards billionaires in this country of good for them. They're smart, you know, they managed to get use their position and so forth. I do that if I had a chance, you know. There's that whole crew that thinks that way. But I think the one thing that was sort of shocking kind of across the spectrum is the arbitrariness of the actions. When we talked about republicanism yesterday, and Bruno Leopold brought up the notion that the word domination, which is often used about republicanism, classical republicanism, and talking about non-domination. It's not as clear as when you say that the sign of domination is arbitrary power. That is,
hey, yeah, bro, we're not gonna have any of this bullshit in the chat. I think you think I think you've wandered in here and you think we're socialists, and you're doing this in the chat to try to own the libs. Do not do this. This is a serious research class. We are watching a complicated presentation. We don't need any of your bullshit in the chat, okay?
is to say, if the Sultan is ruling, or as Voltaire or somebody said, if the Sultan is ruling in Turkey and it doesn't intervene at all in Paris, but could at any point do this to you, you are living as a slave, even though it never manifests itself. But now we've seen here in a country which has a constitution, which is supposed to protect people, even though the dirty little secret, as Aziz's work has shown, is the Constitution is something that protects some and binds others, and doesn't protect some and doesn't bind others, is that the snatching of Rumesa off the street in Boston on video, you know, I mean, it seems to have had something of the emotional effect of not George Floyd, but, you know, in other words, the succession of shootings captured on video and so forth, not to that scale, but there was a kind of shock that this can happen in America, that we have our own Gestapo, even though ICE has been acting like a Gestapo in the shadows for quite a long time. You know, so all I'm saying is something, it seems to me that something very scary happened in those 100 days. Also with the fact that Musk was pulled in and he came with a chainsaw and literally fired all those people, regardless of what the law was.
That
and
didn't
nobody
happen,
had a chance
Philip.
to, as they should have according to the law, to appeal their firings, and all of the things that people expect are the way that things be act. So much of that happened at that moment that it seems to me there was this general anxiety, generalized anxiety, and which in its own way the media tried to contain by suggesting we may be on the road to a constitutional crisis at a time when, since we're living under a totally arbitrary or mostly arbitrary government, we were, by definition, living under a dictatorship, even though it didn't call itself that. So I take from Michael the idea that this moment, as horrible as it was, opens up something in that it's showing the hollowness of institutions that people had taken for a long time to be solid, to provide guardrails, to protect people. Assuming that faith has been shaken to some degree. Does that open the possibility that if a left alternative ever gets organized in some way, it won't be to go back to those institutions that are hollow? Or does America have so little capacity for reality and such an ability to pretend that these institutions acted all the time and were there and so forth and are basically good, that one will look the other way and not take this as a sign that something else has to be in place to stop these things from happening? Those are the questions that I can't figure out, and that I'm still sort of amazed at the things that are happening, how blatant they are, as opposed to the first term. That you have essentially a right that has found its figurehead, but its figurehead is like an 11-year-old kid, emotionally unstable, born on revenge, acting on desire for revenge, for this or that, or to grab as much as he can, or to do, and the question is, we think that Trump has no interest in foreign policy or that, but
are you serious, Philip?
He seems to have discovered something about his own power in these 100 days. That if he says something or if he acts, he can make the whole world wobble.
Bruh.
And that seems to be something that pleases him as a chaos agent. So I don't want to build this too much around Trump, but I'm asking, does the presence of this emotionally unstable chaos agent open up a path to some sort of different future that at least would create a sort of guardrails that wouldn't imprison the left, who, in order to create a truly socialist, communist, democratic, which to me are all the same thing, polity.
Philip, I knew Philip would come through for us. Socialist, communist, democratic, which to Philip are all the same thing.
Create a truly socialist, communist, democratic, which to me are all the same thing, polity, will have to essentially transcend the legality of the moment to put in a new legality. In other words, is the right using up, in a certain way, our own credit for acting in somewhat of a similar fashion in the future? So those are some questions I've raised.
I'm just going to rewind again just so everyone can hear that. I also want to make sure I just get a really good clip of it. Socialist, democratic, socialist, communist, democratic, all the same thing.
But I'm asking, does the presence of this emotionally unstable chaos agent open up a path to some sort of different future that at least would create a sort of guardrails that wouldn't imprison the left, who, in order to create a truly socialist, communist, democratic, which to me are all the same thing, polity, will have to essentially transcend the legality of the moment to put in a new legality. In other words, is the right using up, in a certain way, our own credit for acting in somewhat of a similar fashion in the future? So those are some questions I raised.
Hang on, Billy. If you think that these are Democrats, you are completely incorrect. These are not Democrats. These people hate Democrats. Democrats and socialists are not the same thing. I don't know why you're even talking about the Democratic Party, because the Democratic Party literally has nothing to do with what we're doing here on Socialism Saturday. So can you please let me know in the chat, and I do need you to respond to this question. Do you believe that you're watching Democrats right now? I need you to respond to this question in the chat. I need a yes or a no. Do you believe, Billy, that you are watching Democrats right now? Because if you believe you're watching Democrats right now, that is a delusion that we need to dispense with immediately. Okay. Thank you. I appreciate that. So I don't know why you're bringing the Democratic Party up, because the Democratic Party literally has nothing to do with what's on the screen right now. Okay. Do you understand that? Let us know if you don't understand.
If I may, very fast, I think what you're saying is very true in the sense that I'm connecting it to, the legality and what is the moment now in terms of what do we do. And that is also connected, I think, with what happened in Chile and the kind of believing that the law will save you in a way. There is even when, one thing that you said that I wanted to comment is that you said that, this 100 days is like a counter-revolution. And I would say for a counter-revolution to happen, you first need to have a revolution, and we haven't one. So I wouldn't talk about as a counter-revolution, but more as an oligarchic takeover and, the disregard of any limits, because oligarchy doesn't know any limits. In terms of, this connection or this really devotion of the left to legality, we saw it in Allende. Allende was, a leader that everybody hailed him as a very revolutionary one, but he was very concerned of going by the book, because he thought that the book, the Constitution, the law would save him in a way, would allow for socialism to thrive in a way if you don't trespass, the limits of the law. And there was a recent a book that was edited again by Verso, this Conversations with Allende, where Regis Debray basically interviews him. And, Allende constantly says, well, we need to do this by the book. If we do this and we do a constitutional amendment and we expropriate, but we do it by the book, we will be fine. And there was this naive, in a way, understanding that on the one hand, you will be saved and protected if you are compliant with the law and procedure. And on the other,
No, Kyle. I don't know how you could possibly be again. It really burns me when I go out of my way extensively to make sure that people understand that we are not watching Democrats, that these are communists. No, Kyle, these people have not infiltrated the Democratic Party. No, Kyle, these people are not infiltrating the Republican Party. No, Kyle, these people have no intention of infiltrating the Democratic Party. You've literally been sitting here watching this presentation for 3 hours now. Have you heard any of these people talk about infiltrating the Democratic Party? Can you point to me to any presentation in any Socialism Saturday that you've ever watched where you see socialists talking about infiltrating the Democratic Party? I am so fucking sick of having to dispel this from people who will not get it through their thick fucking skulls. Democrats are not communists. Democrats are not socialists. Socialists have not infiltrated the Democratic Party. Communists have not infiltrated the Democratic Party. We are watching radical revolutionary socialists. Radical revolutionary socialists do not believe in engaging in electoral politics at all in any way. Well, I bet they voted for Kamala. No, they didn't. They absolutely did not vote for Kamala Harris. These people were protesting Kamala Harris. So please, can we fucking stop?
You need to,
like, we're watching a really complex presentation here, and I can't even get people to the step of Democrats are not communists. The real communists are having serious discussions. The real communist activists that are trying to overthrow the Constitution and overthrow the federal government are having serious intellectual discussions on the internet. And what I'm relegated to on our side is Democrats are communists. And no matter how many times, no matter how many videos I show where they're shitting on the Democratic Party, where they're saying they don't support the Democratic Party, where they're calling them all sorts of names, we can't get past the very first educational step, which is acknowledging that communists and socialists are completely fucking different than Democrats. I've literally drawn pictures to try to get people to understand this, and they just refuse. It's incredibly annoying. You know, I've been sitting here I've been being quiet in this presentation because I need to, when presentations are complex, I actually do need to listen to them too. And I need to think about what they mean. And I've been sitting here thinking about the fact that this is how committed the left is. They put so much into education. They put so much energy and effort into education. Everyone on the far left puts energy and effort into educating themselves. They read books. They watch documentaries. They have book clubs. They have meetings. They have study groups. They're doing all of this stuff to try to learn as much as they possibly can about leftist theory and leftist activism. And then they're organizing to try to make what they want happen in the real world. And this is what they spend their time doing. Education is at the forefront of what the left does. The right has no desire to educate themselves at all in any way. And all they do is cling on to these talking points that have been handed down to them by their shill fucking influencers. And they can't let go of those talking points. And it's like, do you really think that we ever have any hope of defeating the left at all when the left focuses so much energy on education, when the left focuses so much of their time on reading books, on understanding theory, on communicating with each other, on sharing their ideas, on having productive discussions about their ideas? And I literally cannot hold a single live stream where I don't hear in the chat from some conservative, Democrats are communists and Democrats been infiltrated by communists and they're all communists. And it's just like, it's such fucking bullshit. And it's like, man, we are so far behind, and it is people on the right that are the cause of the problem. It really is. The right is the biggest problem, and the right is the biggest challenge in defeating the left. Anyway.
Protect law and procedure. And today we're in the awkward position in which we are thrown into maintain or defend a rule of law that, as Aziz was saying at the beginning, it really hasn't served everyone in a way. There's always a percentage or a portion of society which has been oppressed by the rule of law. So the rule of law doesn't emancipate everyone in the same way, but it really keeps an order going in a way, reproduces it. So now we have someone like Bernie Sanders, who basically, I am very happy because with Occupy and him, oligarchy was brought back into the mainstream as a concept, right? This is the good thing about Bernie. But then we have a Bernie Sanders that has been meek, really terrible at Palestine.
Oh, wow, really?
That it basically...
You're telling me that the socialists on the panel think that Bernie is now weak because of his position on Palestine? You don't say.
That you cannot call it left.
I thought they loved Bernie.
You have a moral compass that is really in the right place, in the right moment. What kind of leftist leader are you talking about in a way? Someone that is really, again, super proceduralist. A person that is never going to be able to break the rules for a project in a way. So going, and Michael is going, but Machiavelli, in a way, we need that kind of leadership that is extraordinary in a way, that a leader that is willing to dirty their hands and be able to trespass some of the rules in order to break the oligarchy grip on the system, on the one hand, in addition to the building of a council democracy in a way. But we need basically not going by the rules or knowing which rules to break And of course, we had an Obama who thought of himself, and everybody thought that he was super progressive. But then he was all about bipartisanism, and therefore we don't have, a national healthcare system in a way. There was a moment in which that could have been forced into the U.S., and that would transformed the country, I would say, in the sense that today we are looking at people being basically thrown into a lack of healthcare at all, like people being bankrupt. More than 500,000 people a year go bankrupt because of healthcare bills. So this is something that could have happened, but because there was this reverence toward procedure and law, that the left, so-called, couldn't allow, it didn't break through in a way. So, and we know that FDR also kind of pushed the boundaries of what was, acceptable, and he did it anyway and confronted the judiciary in a way. Do we have that today? So I think we need to think really hard on this, protection of a rule of law that has not been serving the majority for a while in a way, and that we need to transform. And what are those rules that we're willing to trespass, and what are the rules that we're trying to create and entrench? Because the right is doing basically a dismantling and an entrenching at the same time, the same as the process that you were narrating, as is about how these changes come through without changing the letter of the Constitution, right? That is happening right now as we speak. So what is the project of the left in this regard? What are we going to dismantle or disregard, and what are we going to build on?
Two quick responses. One, counter-revolution, without a revolution, is a kind of interesting concept, but like Aziz says, they're trying to leave the 20th century and head back. So in that sense, that's a traditional counter-revolutionary goal, to go back 150 years to when things were right. The other, of course, is how easily we use the word we when we talk about we not doing this and we. And of course, like in this group, there is no we that at the moment includes centrist liberals and us.
Really, Philip, can you say that again? Philip, can you say that again for the conservatives in my audience who cannot understand that you're a fucking communist and that you don't like liberals? Philip, can you say that a little bit louder for people in the back?
Doing this and we, and of course, like in this group, there is no we that at the moment includes centrist liberals and us.
There is no we that includes centrist liberals and them. Is everyone clear? Do you think these people are talking about infiltrating the Democratic Party, Kyle? Because I don't think these people are talking about infiltrating the Democratic Party when they are literally saying there is no fucking universe in which we're working with centrist liberals. Again. Conservatives think that I like embarrassing them on my channel when I call them on their bullshit. No, Kyle, I don't like embarrassing people like you who refuse to listen. But the fact of the matter is if I don't slap you upside the fucking head and tell you to cut the fucking bullshit and listen to what's going on, you don't get it. Oh, look, we have another conservative that's wandered in off the street. Do you think we're socialists? My name, my last name. Do you think that you're owning the libs right now? Do you think that you're telling off the liberals? Is that what you think you're doing? Communism sucks. 100 million DEAD. Can't be wrong. Do you think you're talking to communists right now? Did you bother to actually listen to what was going on while you waited the 5 minutes to subscribe to my channel to be able to chat in? Do you know where you are? Do you have any fucking clue what's going on right now? Do you even know what you're listening to? Let us know in the chat if you have any fucking sense at all about what's actually going on. Again, Philip?
Go back 150 years to when things were right. The other, of course, is how easily we use the word.
Yeah, he's still not getting it. Still not getting it. Still not getting it. Do you think you let me speak slowly for the retard in my chat. My name, my last name, that is your retarded username. Do you think you are talking to communists right now? This is a yes or no question. This might be too difficult for you since I don't think you're necessarily the brightest crayon in the box. Do you think that you are talking to communists right now? You're welcome to reply in the chat, because it seems to us... No. That's not the answer to the question. Your listening comprehension perhaps could use a bit of work. The question is, and I'm going to speak slowly because I think you're a low IQ retard. Do you believe you are talking to communists in the chat? This is a yes or no question. It doesn't require anything other than a yes or no answer. Oh, look, still not working on the reading comprehension. Let's take a look at the retard's channel history. Let's see. Oh, look, this is the first time that this person has ever been on my channel before. Imagine my shock. Retard, I'm going to give you one last chance to answer the question before we permanently ban you for being far too stupid to interact with us. Do you believe that you are speaking to communists in the chat? This is again a... Oh, I'm going to ban you. I'm going to ban you. You make no mistake, I'm going to ban you because you don't know how to listen. You can't answer a simple question. You aren't smart enough to be here, but I'm just curious if you're actually able to muster some sort of yes or no answer before we ban you for being obviously too retarded to ever interact with us ever again. Do you believe that you are talking to communists in the chat? Yes or no? One of these words has 3 letters. One of these words has 2 letters. I'm not asking for the sun, the moon, and the stars. I'm pretty sure you learned yes or no when you were a child. So use your words and respond to the question that you're being asked. Do you believe you are interacting with communists in the chat? We're waiting. And while we're waiting, I want to thank Renan for being on the side of smugness tonight. You know, listen, man, when we sit through difficult presentations like this, I think that we have earned the right to be smug. We earn the right to be smug because unlike retards like this who show up and they're getting their chat in and they think they're owning those. Did you know that 100 million people died because of communism? They're all worked up because of their chat and they think they're owning the libs, and they don't. In the 5 minutes that they spend waiting to chat in on my channel, they don't bother to kind of ascertain the situation that they've wandered into. And it does seem as though our retarded friend has gone very quiet because our retarded friend doesn't have the listening comprehension to answer a very simple question. Last chance. Yeah, it's cute because we're actually trying to avoid a communist revolution, and the biggest barrier we have to avoiding a communist revolution is retarded fucking conservatives. Every fucking time. Retarded conservatives every fucking time. So, retard, goodbye. You're permanently banned on the channel. We don't want you here. Go away. Hey, Zachary, thank you for the super chat. Take this as an apology earlier. Much love and respect to you. Hey, you know what, Zachary? See, this is the right approach. This is the approach that endears me. You come in, you say something that's off base. I correct you. You take the correction and you learn. That's all I'm asking for. You're walking into a classroom. You're trying to learn something, and I appreciate Zachary is here to learn something. You're trying to learn something, and then someone says, no, bro, you're wrong about that, but let me tell you what's actually going on. And you listen and you adapt. And then you pay me money, which I also really appreciate. Hey, look at that. 15 more bucks in super chats just by laying down the law in my chat. I love it when that works out. All right. We are returning to this. We have about 20 minutes left. Everyone, we can do it. We can hang in there. We're getting through the rest of this presentation. We're finishing this up. Okay, let's go.
We, when we talk about we not doing this and we, and of course, like in this group, there is no we that at the moment includes centrist liberals and us. You know, the construction of a we, of course, is what politics is about. And who is in it and who is not antagonistically, that
fill up.
You know, there are different construals.
Thank you, Jenny. So, I think we should make it a tradition that every time I block a conservative, people pay me money for keeping. I like to keep the chat a nice place to be for everyone, and we need to keep the retards on all sides out. And you guys can show your appreciation for me having the finest cultivated community on the internet by sending in super chats. I appreciate it. Thank you, Jenny.
I'll go to Aziz.
Yeah, I mean, so I think there's a lot there, and I'm curious too what Michael has to say. So I'm just going to quickly maybe connect Philip and Camilla's thoughts to a question that we got. So we got a question from Gerardo. So the question is that there's a real issue of whether or not, and I hope I'm doing justice to it, that we're in the dusk of social movements. So that there's an idea that social movements can actually consolidate something like transformative majorities, and that those transformative majorities can exercise constituent power through, you know, national conventions or other means to then produce new durable regimes. And so that's basically been an operative theory of, broadly speaking, representative democratic politics for the 20th century. And there's an issue about if we're seeing the end of it. If, in a sense, the politics, you can even think about like the politics of somebody like Trump, where they're effectively trying a New Deal break, which is they're trying to informally change the American constitutional system, but not through actually the means of the New Deal, which was mass sustained mobilization, legislation that requires supermajorities, election and re-election. They're trying to do it through authoritarian means of like taking control over the executive branch and then using the executive order, because you can't actually get the stuff passed through Congress to have like one great break that entrenches something potentially new. And that in a way speaks to the impulse of the question, which is, are we at the end of an era in which constituent power, mass constituent power, is a source for generating transformation? And in a sense, like this worry, which I think is incredibly heightened in the US, is part of why there's a left liberal embrace of process. So even with like, maybe the courts will save us, or a commitment to like liberal legality, because I think it's true that like,
yo, actually, Zachary, becoming a member.
If we just think in the American experience, not just in the US, like the great transformative changes to end slavery, to pursue racially reconstructed projects, to empower laboring classes, required a pretty extensive amount of norm breaking, but norm breaking that was authorized by little d democratic legitimacy, by the fact that you had mass popular support that could justify it outside of procedural means. Like if you're in a moment, as the question highlights, where it feels like, well, can you count on that kind of constituent power to be exercised? Then I think it's a reason why folks that are, let's say, more in a liberal space feel like all you have is process, and you have to kind of double down on rule of law and legality. And I think that that's too pessimistic a take on American politics, but I think it's a real problem to highlight, because to me, the great success of the neoliberal enterprise, broadly speaking, and its conjunction with right-wing politics in the US over the last half century, is precisely this dismantling of all of the institutions that would actually build the capacity of social movements to exercise constituent power. Like the plethora of spaces and sites that could fit together as effectively a kind of state outside of the state that could then push toward the types of social changes that we think of as exercises of constituent power. That stuff has been taken apart bit by bit, and it's produced a condition in the present where it feels like that your only choice is a holding on to a kind of liberal legality. Now, I would say in response, that is just a statement of the predicament, and that truly the only way we're going to get probably from here to some genuinely renewed or transformed legal, political, and economic system will be through commitments to various kinds of norm and rule breaking, but that are authorized democratically by a transformative majority. And so that means that the politics has to be not about sort of treating constituent power as necessarily in its twilight, but understanding the reasons why it's been so dramatically degraded and what would be the...
Okay, we need to go back and listen to this again. He's saying the only way in which we are going to get our socialist utopia is if we break all the norms of society, but we make sure the people, the majority, are on our side when we do it, because that's going to give it like more legitimacy. Again,
here to some genuinely renewed or transformed legal, political, and economic system will be through commitments to various kinds of norm and rule breaking, but that are authorized democratically by a transformative majority. And so that means...
He doesn't mean democratically as in elections. Everyone understands that, right? Because again, these people believe that America is not a democracy. He believes our elections are not democratic. He's not talking about the norms in which we have them now. He's talking about some other effort in which he believes the populace, the people, have sanctioned some sort of uprising against the current system. Does everyone understand that? Again, listen.
Here to some genuinely renewed or transformed legal, political, and economic system will be through commitments to various kinds of norm and rule breaking, but that are authorized democratically by a transformative majority. And so that means that the politics has to be not about sort of treating constituent power as necessarily in its twilight, but understanding the reasons why it's been so dramatically degraded and what would be the kinds of social, cultural, material conditions that would revive it. And it's why, again, this is the reason why I ended where I did, which is that to me is a practical political project, which is what would be all of the sites that would be able to connect social movements into something like durable institutions that can exercise constituent authority. How have they been dismantled? What would be reforms or changes that would make it easy? It would expand the relative bargaining and political power of those groups, make it easier to actually exercise something like a conjoined constituent authority, and how to then proceed. So it's like, it means if you're thinking about you want a constitutional convention a la Chile, or the project in Chile, maybe the thing that you might want to start with is how do you make it far easier actually to organize into unions because of the centrality of the trade union in many of these projects elsewhere as well as domestically. Or like,
again, he fucking said it again. This is the second time in this presentation this guy has said, again, law professor. I think he's at Boston College, although Philip says he's at Boston University, but I went to Boston University and I know how much people confuse Boston University with Boston College. I'm pretty sure he's from Boston College because I've seen him before. Anyway, it doesn't matter. This is a law professor who, for the second time in this presentation, has basically said organizing in the unions is central to pushing a leftist political philosophy. Again.
And how to then proceed. So it's like, you know, it means if you're thinking about you want a constitutional convention a la Chile, or the project in Chile.
Yeah, I knew it. It's at Boston College.
Is how do you make it far easier actually to organize into unions because of the centrality of the trade union in many of these projects elsewhere as well as domestically? Or like, how do you actually reconstitute the basic units of what would be constituent authority? But Michael, curious what you think, because this is really a question about how to connect material and formal constitution together.
Michael, you've been a theorist of constituent power. I think it's a good point.
Michael is at Duke University, as a reminder.
Just briefly on that first point, and then I had one other thought that I wanted to go, that Aziz was just saying, and I'm, you know, I definitely, you know, feel allied with you, Aziz, in that. One thing I'm wondering about the need for the institutions that go along with the possibility of mobilizing the immense majority for some social transformation.
Social transformation.
The one thing I wonder about, Aziz, as you're talking, is about the sequence. In some ways, the way you're seeing it, and even the way you were imagining the sort of popular front, there would need to first be the institutions, then there could be the possibility of both the rule breaking, maybe breaking other things, etc. I'm wondering if it has to be, if the construction of those institutions has to
wait. Did the Duke University professor again just advocate for rule breaking and breaking other things, by which he probably means violence and destruction? Hey, Billy, welcome to the channel. Billy, I'm glad to have you as a member of the channel. As a reminder, as a channel member, you do get access to my spy streams where we go inside live leftist trainings and we talk about them. I don't have another spy stream scheduled right now, but that doesn't really mean anything because spy streams are scheduled on the fly all the time. Please pay attention to the community tab on the channel where I will post your access information for spy stream. You can also make sure you're subscribed to my Substack, which is Karlyn, KARLYN.substack.com, because I always send out emails on Substack when we're doing another spy stream. You're a member of the YouTube channel, so you don't have to subscribe through the Substack, although if you wanted to, you could, but you don't have to get access to spy stream. It's just to make sure you know what's going on. All right, so welcome, Billy. We appreciate you. Let's listen again to Michael.
Transformation. The one thing I wonder about, Aziz, as you're talking, is about the sequence. In some ways, the way you're seeing it, and even the way you were imagining the sort of popular front, there would need to first be the institutions, then there could be the possibility of both the rule breaking, maybe breaking other things, etc. I'm wondering if it has to be, if the construction of those institutions has to come second. Like if there has to first be the breaking, you know, that then generates the possibility of the institutions.
Oh yeah.
I mean, or maybe think of it as a kind of that maybe first there has to be the renewed contestational movements, antagonistic movements, even ones that break things, and that is what we need for the generation of that institutional structure that then can support the change. Anyway, that's really just an hypothesis, because and it's partly thinking that because the kind of institutional construction and transformation you're talking about seems to be an extremely long process, and there also has to be a popular base on which that is made. And yeah, there's some ways in which this isn't exactly what Philip was talking about is Leninism earlier, but this is some sort of spark or movement that there seems to be more practical.
Hey, Melinda says Decode the Left is a Substack. Yes, that is correct, Melinda. So if you see Decode the Left at the top, it is Karlyn, KARLYN.substack.com. It says Decode the Left at the top. And if you join the Substack, that will support the work I'm doing. But also just make sure you're subscribed for free. Everyone, even if you don't want to become a member on my Substack right now, which you all should, because that's how I fund all this stuff, please make sure at a minimum you are subscribed for free to my Substack, because I publish a lot of content on my Substack. I do live streams on my Substack. I have podcasts that are exclusive to my Substack. I break down the left. I have a massive archive of content on the Substack, most of which is freely available to everyone. And so make sure everyone is subscribed. Actually, let me just put the link in the chat. Make sure you guys are subscribed to free email updates. And then if you want to subscribe to paid updates, I don't do a lot of members only stuff except for Spy Stream on the Substack. It's just if you want to support the work I'm doing, you can sign up for that. But everyone should at minimum make sure you're signed up for free. Eric, thank you for a super chat. For even a small fraction of their plan to work, you need population growth. No, you don't. No, you don't. No, wrong, incorrect. To generate the wealth and economy to pay for everything, to uphold the institutions they want. Eric, I'm going to have to go ahead and very much respectfully disagree with you. And I'm respectfully disagreeing because you sent me $10. And of course, I appreciate everyone who sends me money because it supports the work I'm doing. But I do not agree with your supposition at all. Furthermore, I don't actually think their plan's going to work regardless. I think that their plans lead to starvation and death. But that doesn't really matter because they are currently winning and we are currently in a Marxist cultural revolution in this country. And it doesn't matter if their plans are going to work or not, because the track that we're on right now, they are going to win and they're going to get their Marxist utopia. And then we're all going to starve. And that's really going to suck. And that's going to be awful. Also, yes, a good point. They do actually want to abolish all currency. That is also a fair point. But hey, thanks for the $10, Eric. I do appreciate you engaging in capitalism.
Cool. The other thing I wanted to say, which is much less practical and maybe it's too long, too much of a long vision and maybe too theoretical, which is that I view it in the same way that I view the current international power of the U.S. as a sign of its weakness and decline. I see it also domestically, the actions of the Trump administration, and which seem in some ways like a great exertion of power. I see it as symptoms of weakness. And I don't mean weakness like they can't destroy things. They can absolutely destroy things. And they are destroying things. They will destroy things. The weakness is really about the inability to generate a lasting structure. That's what it seems to me. And so, yeah, so I don't mean like, oh, don't worry, they're weak. Like, everything's gonna be fine. No, everything's gonna suck. But what it matters
True.
to me, that analysis of the weakness, I'm thinking, at least I'm thinking about it in parallel, both on the international and the domestic front, is that it's a well, maybe it's just that it's something that can be contested and it will collapse on its own, but after years
Like
and much
leftism.
destruction. It somehow matters to me. Maybe I'm even not
Just
quite
like
clear exactly why it
leftism.
matters so much to me to recognize this as weakness, not as strength, which is a kind of exertion of force without hegemony.
Yeah.
Kind of.
This is actually a really good point for Eric. Eric, these people plan to grow human beings in baby pods. Like, literally, we have them on video saying this. They want to destroy the nuclear family and they want to grow human beings in baby pods. They want surrogacy to be how people have kids. So you think that they don't control the population in their Marxist utopia? If they need the population to grow up, they will grow more children. Jan, it's good to see you. Hey, Karlyn, just popping in on my break. Continue to be amazing teaching everyone about socialists. You're the best. You're the best, Jan. I appreciate you, and thank you for the super chat. Do leftists actually think these people? Well, these people are leftists, Billy. So when I say leftist, I'm usually referring to the far left, which is like communists and socialists, maybe some democratic socialists in there too. But these people are leftists. Do Democrats think these people are on their side? No. Democrats hate these people. This is the great irony of all the bullshit talking points that come out of the conservative right. The Biden administration ignored these people for 4 years. They really did. Kamala Harris, when she was campaigning for president, spit in the faces of these people over and over and over and over and over again. And this is why I'm going insane screaming. You guys think Kamala Harris is a communist? The communists were showing up at Kamala Harris's events, and Kamala Harris was telling them to fuck off. Like, that's honestly not far off what happened. I'm being a little bit hyperbolic, but really not much. Kamala Harris and her husband were doing speeches about capitalism while these people were protesting their events. These people were protesting the DNC. The Democrats were extremely aware that these people were not on their side. And so, no, the Democrats hate these people just as much as they hate the Democrats. And that's the great irony of conservative bullshit talking points, is like they're completely unhinged from reality. And it just keeps the right in a perpetual state of ignorance. So no offense to you, Billy, because Billy is now on our team. Billy is on team. Democrats and communists are not the same thing. And once you learn that, just wait till the other things you're going to learn that the conservatives never showed you. Just wait. There's not much longer in the video, Janet. There's about 10 more minutes, so you're not going to miss much. We've been going a long time, so if you want to go enjoy your Saturday, please, you are released. But we are going to finish up. Let's round out the evening, guys.
Fragile authoritarian structure, but even authoritarian without the kinds of structures of consent that other authoritarian regimes we can think of have had. That's where I'm thinking about it. And maybe it's not so important. It's certainly not important for the actual immediate. You know, the actual immediate doesn't matter whether they're strong or weak in the long term. It's they're horrible in the meantime. But okay, that's part. Sorry, that last part, I'm still not able to express why I think it's so important. But maybe the first part, though, it would be something if we had. I mean, I think we've run out of time today. But for future discussion, would be interesting what in the U.S. today is possible as a sequence of development of a movement of the mass majority and
communism,
the construction of the institutions that support it.
Communism.
That does seem to me like a conundrum, which the left, meaning the left I want,
communists,
is faced with.
He means communists.
It's funny that all of your work seems to fall into this area between movement and institution. Camilla is the notion of creating plebeian institutions that are outside the state. Michael has been associated with movements. Aziz talks about regenerating movement culture. And the example you give, which is interesting, is the Panthers Free Breakfast Program. And I just thought, well, that's an institution. We think of it as being part of a movement, but that is an institution. And your suggestion was that the first thing to do was to feed and house people and provide services that the government or the oligarchical government is not providing. And then when you become indispensable for that, to start doing aggressive political interventions as part of it. I mean, it was an interesting, that deserves another discussion.
Can I just throw,
okay, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Michael.
Well, I was just thinking, Philip, in your own example, the Panthers certainly didn't just do breakfast programs and then start doing antagonistic interventions. They were both at the same time, or, you know, they go hand in hand. But I think questioning the sequence is a political question about what our current situation allows and what we have the capacities for. And one can't answer it for all situations and all time.
Yeah, I mean, I think I was just going to say something similar, which is that the stuff about movement culture, I get that from a wonderful historian of populism, of 19th century populism that Camilla was sort of referencing, and that's Lawrence Goodwin. and his discussion of the role of the Farmers Alliance and the Populist Party.
The Farmers
really
Alliance.
Institutional apparatuses that provided the services, the educational experiences, the life world that moved people from a received culture to a movement culture. And that was like the central demand of, you know, a party, like a party formation as a transformative political project. And I think Michael's totally right on, which is, to me, the problem is that there's immediate term demands and then there's long-term needs. And they both have to be pursued basically at the same time. And I genuinely am not sure about the question of sequencing. I think that's a really significant issue of like kind of political strategy that needs to be thought through. And so I'd welcome having a conversation about that. On this point that you're making, I do think it's relevant that, you know, that Stephen Miller, there really isn't, even within the kind of more nativist wings of like American life, like there isn't a genuinely mass base behind Miller's vision of the United States. And to me, the reason why that's relevant is because still the brand of authoritarianism, if we're thinking in sort of like the social science rubrics that we're talking about for the US, is still something like is competitive electoral authoritarianism. It's not, so what Trump and company have done, if we were talking about like the early part of the 20th century or other kinds of authoritarian structures, is enough to claim the state and then just simply impose, you know, like political will because you have a large enough base to do that. But that's not consistent with the brand of authoritarianism that has been emerging, which actually rests on having something close to or a bare majority. Like, you know, Modi has a bare majority. Erdogan has a majority. You can say the same thing about Orban in Hungary, and you can think about the other locations.
This is actually a really good point, and it might be an understated point. I know we're getting to the end of the show, so people might be tired of hearing this stuff, but like, I've been undercover at leftist meetings. I've been in the room when the door is closed and there's no video camera running. I've watched enough of their private meetings on live streams and stuff like that. The left does not argue and bicker at their meetings. They really don't, because you got to remember, and they have guides and protocols for how they interact. Like I've talked about this, but they have like a conflict guide that's like this thick that I saw in person when I was undercover at one of their events. That like it's very much it's kind of like an improv. If you've ever done improv, you never say no when you're doing improv. You say yes and. Because if you say no, it just shuts everything down. But if you say yes and, you can build off of other people's points. Even if you don't agree with what someone's saying, it's like at least you continue the conversation in like a congenial way, right? So meeting etiquette, meeting protocol is very important to them. They never argue. They never bicker. They don't always agree. But they disagree in a highly civilized way. Yeah, so Kurt is making a great point. I watched what I thought was disagreement, which was greeted with like, thank you for your opinion. And now here's my opinion. And it's all just very collegial and like civilized. Whereas on the right, you've got name calling, people are insulting each other, people are posting embarrassing information and all this stuff. The left doesn't do that shit like at all.
As well. And it's being able to wield that majority to then impose all of these like kind of violent and coercive outcomes. But these folks don't have a durable majority. And so there is a basic tension between the realities of electoral authoritarianism and the brand of power that they want to exercise. It's also why the turn to the executive order rather than to legislation. Like Orban and company, they start with like building through legislation, you know, or like in some ways it feels like Trump and company have been jumping steps, but the reason why they're jumping steps is because they don't actually have the base within contemporary authoritarian frameworks to be able to pursue the specific ends that they want. And so that is a latent weakness that we have to be aware of, and also is something that they certainly know. And so you have to be conscious of the kinds of state tools that they're going to try to impose in order to be able to avoid that problem.
That's great, and we could continue this and should at some time.
I mean, maybe last point for Camilla. Camilla seems like you can bring us home with the last point.
One point with the sequence part, because I think, again, what happened in Chile needs to be something that we need to reckon with. Like, I study the uprisings in history, and we need to really learn the lessons in order to react when the event happens, because it's not something that you can engineer, right? You can have a increasing of the contradictions. You can have like people fed up with, the rule of law, and at some point it breaks apart, and then is when the constituent moment comes about, and you need to be ready for it. And in Chile, we have a very low concentration of unions because of the dictatorship. They were dismantled. People were not really into organizing because you are afraid of your neighbor being, ratted out. That there was a kind of suspicious, behavior towards the other. And in addition, you have an extreme neoliberalism in which people are atomized. They are not really in the workplace because the workplace is not there to begin with. People from Zoom, from, the gig economy, all these, labor unions were for another part of the life, in a way, a part of capitalism. I am part of unions. Of course, we all have to be supportive of unions, but there is all this, group of people that cannot even be part of a union because they are not really employed in that way that they can actually unionize. So in Chile, what happened with this, uprising was that the movement and the organizing at the local level happened at the same time in an explosive manner. People that didn't have any political allegiance, political practice at all, that they didn't vote, they were not part of a party, they were not part of any organization, they became part of local assemblies because there was a blockade in terms of the media. And I see something happening very similar to what is happening with Palestine. It is not only about Philip saying about, putting ads on TV. It's about the press, the media really kind of manufacturing consent in a way and creating a reality that is not the actual reality. And when that happens and people know about it, they go to other places and they want to kind of cross information. And I think us as kind of theorists of the left, we need to be ready with kind of a blueprint or some kind of project that has, be flexible enough to be able to accommodate the energy that comes from below. So a mobilization and institutions come at the same time, and even constitutional change can come very fast. The thing that we need to be aware of that moment can also be controlled, because if you control the media, as happened in Chile, if you control the media, you can really control the narrative, and that could be prompting that people will decree their own ruin, as Machiavelli would say. So you need to be very aware that not because we break things and we begin a process of change, it will lead to a progressive end, because people are atomized, are not political subjects, actors. They are just consumers of politics. And we really need to change the culture. So that is, I think the kind of creating spaces for people to exercise political judgment is a very important endeavor for us as theorists.
You're muted, Philip.
Philip, come on.
I was going to say I want to hire Camilla to promote my Chile book when I finish it. Thanks everybody for for this incredibly interesting conversation. And Aziz, I want to thank you also for hijacking the word life world from Habermas. I think that's a much better word than a movement culture.
Yeah. Thank you for the presentation where you guys admitted that unions are a leftist project and that you want to overthrow the Constitution and all that stuff. We appreciate you guys. We got some good clips tonight. I'm really appreciative of that. As a reminder, guys, this is all part of Red May, which is the revolutionary, the Revolutionary Socialists out in Seattle. Red May, unfortunately, is winding down because can you believe it? The month of May is almost over. Where is this year going? I don't know where this year is going. I feel like I've got nothing done. I'm in a perpetual state of getting nothing done and yet always having, you know, more work on my plate. Probably because I feel like I'm getting nothing done. But in fact, I am getting stuff done because I'm creating more leftist content than anyone on the internet to break down the far left and stuff like that. Anyway, the revolutionary socialists out in Seattle still have a couple more things to share with us before the end of Red May. And we will be tuning in to a live presentation that they have coming up on Thursday. And it's going to be called Fake Work, How I Began to Suspect That Capitalism Was a Joke. So if you want one last infusion of Red May, I've written 3 books this year. Kurt, I haven't written 1 book this year. I've written 3 fucking books this year. I've technically written 4 books. I have 1 book done that I haven't published yet. And I have 3 more books that I'm working on. So, okay, so fair enough, Kurt. I've already written 3/almost 4 books this year and have at least 3 more books that I'm working on. So I guess I have gotten some stuff done. I guess so. That's all right. I appreciate it. So, guys, we will be tuning in to Red May live on Wednesday for our 5 p.m. stream. So if you want to come and say hello to Philip and ask him to change the background of his screen so we don't see some stupid eyes wide shut background, but instead we have some cool kitchen background. Listen, I feel like Philip's kitchen is an integral part of Red May. And I feel like Philip needs to bring the kitchen back, even if he has dishes that he hasn't done. We're not judging Philip for the amount of dirty dishes he has stacked in his sink. Well, fair enough. Yeah. We aren't judging Philip for the amount of dirty dishes he has stacked in his sink. We aren't judging Philip for the amount of clothes that are in the background of his kitchen. We aren't even judging Philip for the dog that occasionally creeps into the shot. We just want to wish Philip well at the end of Red May. He's provided us with a lot of great content. And so we will be joining him live for the last live stream of Red May on Wednesday. And it's going to be really great. And Sarah Jaffe's a psycho. We've covered Sarah Jaffe before. I don't remember the other 2, or the other 3 rather. Sarah Jaffe is a psycho, though. She's crazy. Crazy person. Anyway. That is all we have for the stream today, guys. As a reminder, I do take Sundays off, although I am kind of considering maybe streaming because there's a book that I really need to read called Queer Ultraviolence that is a massive collection of essays. And I should have probably started reading it for Counter-Revolutionary Book Club before now, but I'm kind of thinking about doing like a mega stream or a couple mega streams where I just read Queer Ultraviolence, which again is a massive collection of extremely far leftist queer essays. So I'm kind of thinking about doing a stream like that tomorrow. We'll see how it goes. I also just might sleep in tomorrow and I don't know, maybe have a normal human being, a normal life. What the fucking conservative bullshit is this? We're at the end of the stream and I have someone coming in with all caps. When did they say overthrow the Constitution? Retard. They literally talked about transforming the Constitution, getting rid of the Electoral College, getting rid of the Supreme Court, getting rid of the Senate, this is why conservatives don't do well on my streams. They're not even smart enough to understand what they're actually listening to. You read tarot cards. Yeah, you're goddamn right I read tarot cards. And tarot cards are right more often than conservative retards. Goodbye. I'm not even going to toy with this person. I'm just going to ban them because I don't give a fuck. My God. Anyway. If you guys want to support the work I'm doing, head over to my Substack. That is Karlyn, KARLYN.substack.com. Mud Chat says, in case I haven't said it, I love you, Karlyn. Today, I love you, Karlyn, and I say it out loud every time I tune in. Hey, thanks, Mud Chat. I love you, too. Thank you for being a member of the channel. I do appreciate it. If you guys want to support the work I'm doing, head over to Substack and do that. You get a variety of perks. We do movie night on the Substack tomorrow night. Yo, I got another $5. Sweet. Bringing our super chat total up to $145 for the night. I appreciate that. Guys, I may be back tomorrow. I may not. So make sure you subscribe to the channel. Make sure you've got notifications set up. And last super chat for the all caps idiot. My God. My God. My God. All right, guys. That is all we have for tonight. And now I'm going to take my leave. And I'm going to go gently beat my head against the wall. And possibly smoke a bowl. And go to sleep. And that's what I'm going to do for the rest of the night. I hope you guys all have a good night. And we will see you next time we see you. Take care, guys. Have a good one. We'll see you soon. Bye.
How are you feeling? How long have you been here?
3 months, May 17th.
And what brought you?
That's difficult to answer.
Would you give me some idea?
I am not completely like other people.
What do you mean by that?
People dislike me because I am not completely like them. I am trying to do with my life something which few people try to do, and this influences my thinking and consequently my action.
What is it you're trying to do with your life?
Play the piano for people.
I'm not clear. How is it that playing the piano for people has eventually resulted in your being here in the hospital?
That's difficult to answer.